Yeah. Just to balance it off. Oh, good. Well, I really appreciate that. It's a big one for us. So yeah, especially your district.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our Glendale City Council workshop. This meeting is for council members to review and discuss important issues, projects, and future council meeting agenda items. It's a work study session only and allows the council to hear input from city staff. No action will be taken at this workshop, and there will not be an opportunity for public comment. This meeting is streaming live on Glendale's Facebook and YouTube pages and the city's cable television station, Glendale Channel 11. Thank you for joining us.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Glendale City Council Workshop Session. Today's date, October 22nd, 2024. This meeting is called to order. I'll go ahead and do a attendance roll call. Councilmember Baldonegro.
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Mellner.
Present.
Councilmember Tomchop.
Here.
Councilmember Turner. Vice Mayor.
Here.
Councilmember Turner. And Chairman is present. With that, Ms. Bauer, would you go ahead and introduce item number 1?
Downtown Campus Reinvestment Project Update.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Here for today's update, I've asked Eddie Garcia to provide the information only because we're in a very technical part of the development of the construction of the project, and he's well more versed in that, so he'll lead you through my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. It's update number 27, and much like before, it's been about a month since our last review, but much like before, we'll talk a little bit about the site activities that are happening and where we're headed in the next couple weeks. I will say this, that with the temperatures finally starting to drop, it's been a lot more fun to be on site, especially with a lot of steel, and steel gets very hot, so we're happy to see that the temperatures are finally dropping. But that doesn't mean our efforts are cooling down by any means. Our teams have increased to about 70 construction team members on site. So with each and every week of activities, things start to get more and more labor intensive. So that's a good thing. So as much before, we like to do an overview of what's happening. This is from our webcam. So I will say in caveat that with when we publish this document to you usually on Friday before, there's still activity that keeps going on prior in the week that doesn't always get captured here. But so we try to reserve this slide to be as close to where we are today as possible. But the major activities that are going on right now is still a lot of the steel installation. And that's going to be proceeding at least on the exterior side for the remainder of November. And on top of that, we're starting to look at what we call the shafts of the building. We're starting to create openings for the shafts, and we're going to work from the top down when we do that. And then we've shown you some pictures of how the lower level plumbing is coming along with the elevator pits and stuff that we're adding, and new stairwells. There's some new activity on the garage. And then if you've seen most recently, if you drive by, that the council roof has been removed. And that was strategically done now to prevent from the monsoon season, et cetera, from happening. So, but we are protecting the roof in place, and so far so good there. So wanted to talk to you a little about some of the material that keeps coming on site. These are what we call edge beams. Sometimes we use in the field as fascia beams. These are the structural members that are going to go on the perimeter of the building, especially on the north and south side of the building. And these form where the triangular shape of the floor plan is. These are pretty sizable. They're comprehensive in the way they're built. So it's not just a normal I-beam that you would see on site. You can see a lot of plate stiffeners, and in this case you see some rebar coming out. And what these beams are designed to do is they create the new slab edge, and they go on the north and south side of the building. So one of the things we have on our calendar coming up in November for this group is a ceremonial beam signing. I believe it's scheduled for November 6th. A beam like this for the south side will be prepared for you. So it just gives you a sense of the scale and the magnitude of how these beams are composed. Incidentally, as far as we've talked before about a lot of the components on the building steel-wise, but City Hall by itself is pushing about 214 tons of steel that we've added to the building. So the bones of the building are really strong. What we're doing here is allowing for the new skin to be applied, and we're gaining some efficiencies in the floor plate, and then some new openings for new mechanical shaftways and stairwells and an elevator. So all of these things are now finally coming together. This is just some of the example of where we're headed with the installation of these beams. This is on the north side, and these photos were taken from the garden level. So just outside the space between the chambers and the council clerk and mayor's office altogether. So there's going to be a brand new opening. And the picture on the left shows how these beams are being erected in there. And so the first one that you see is literally, this was probably the most complex of all of them so far, the starter beam, which is right above that red crane that you see there. It actually runs past the original stairwell, so we had to notch the original stairwell and place this beam all at one time. And so if we got that one right, we'd be in good shape as we moved up, and that one just fit like a glove. It was perfect. So, and then the picture on the right you see is just sort of the complexities of removing some of the old floor area and then putting in the structural systems that are going to support the new curtain wall, which is all glass. So you're going to have a double height space when you walk in at that level of the garden level, so you can see the first floor from there. This is not without some gymnastics. There's a lot of energy and time that's put into the engineering design of how to accommodate multiple connections with the original building. In this particular corner, we had several points coming into the same spot and having to reshape how they glue themselves together, if you will, or connect themselves together. So this is an example of an existing column that has a new saddle and a beam extension to the original beams that are there, and it's preparing it's the saddle that you see there is preparing for receiving a new connection altogether. And then the right, you see the tube steel that forms the support for the curtain wall. And as you turn the corner into the western side of the building, this is a shot looking towards the north, essentially northwest. The same kind of beam goes along the side, so you can get a sense of the scale and the effort it takes to maneuver these beams. As they moved up to the top, we have 4 of these boom cranes, or these boom lifts that you see here, which are easy to sort of pick your way through the various levels. As we got to the top, though, it took a little bit more of a heavier truck crane to install these beams. But it really gives you an idea of the complexity that's involved in putting this together. Now moving to the lower level of the garage, or excuse me, of the City Hall. You've seen some previous shots of this before. It has trenching, has come through with saw cutting the floor, etc. This is looking at the future fitness area. So to the right is where the gentleman is standing, is a new elevator core, and obviously to the left here is part of the fitness area. So there's a lot of excavating still going on, but a lot of it's due to putting in new waste lines, and this is to support the fitness center and any other plumbing needs that we have. We have some small kitchenette areas, etc. So this work is scheduled to be completed, at least for putting back the concrete and cover, in the next couple weeks or so, and then the elevator footing is coming in the next couple weeks. We'll bring the concrete guys around at the same time. So it's all very much synchronized to how their activities and flows are going. So we're really on track with that. Mentioned earlier in the beginning the council roof being removed. Most of this is due to the new configuration of the council footprint. So we've modified the roof in terms of its profile. But we are protecting it. The underlayment was really, really good. So as we've taken off the cover, we feel that that's going to give you most of the protection. In the weekend that we did have a little sprinkles. I think it was late last week or earlier midweek. We do have some protection in the areas where it could be affected with really at the entry points that were exposed when demolition. The picture on the right, and this has now been removed, but all of the beams that projected further than the wall, basically the rafter beams, are all being cut to give you a really clean, solid edge. So the roof will be essentially stops at the top of the wall, and then you'll see brand new finishes and so forth come on the perimeter. So that work is mostly complete, but there'll be an ongoing schedule between activity on the exterior and interior of council. Here's some things that's different than last time we spoke. You've probably noticed as well, there's a lot of scaffolding on the perimeter of the garage. Well, what you're seeing here is the before and then after. So the before is all the scaffolding and set up for the new finish that's going on the garage. So all the surfaces were treated and essentially knocked down and prepped for the new coating to go on. So it's a direct applied finish, or we call it a DAF, if you will. So that's basically, it might be an acrylic coating. I forget if it's acrylic or other, but essentially it's an integrated color. And what you're seeing here is the finished product. We still need to go back and paint the steel and do other edge treatments and so forth. We still have stairs coming down the road, but it was, we're doing this a bit ahead of schedule. A lot of this is to set us up for phased work between the amphitheater, the council chambers, and the city hall. So we want to have that zone basically complete to the degree we can as we move forward with the other phased activities on the project site. So with that, that's a brief update of where we are at the moment. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the update. I have a couple of questions. So has the entire steel package now been delivered, or do we still have outstanding, parts of steel that we're still waiting for?
Mayor, Councilmember Tommelchoff, we get them about every few days. So all the steel has been sent for production, and to the degree of how complete they are in production, delivery to the site, I would have to get you some more information. But that package has been procured. It's just a matter of the timing and delivery of the steel arriving after fabrication. So I'd have to find get you some more information on, do we have all the steel on site? My understanding is that we still have some other beams coming on the south side, for instance. And I think they're due in the next couple weeks, because one of them is the beam that you might be signing on was due the first week of November. So as far as miscellaneous steel outside of that, I can't say for sure where that is in production right now.
So, Mayor, if I could, so as the fabrication happens, though, is it sent? We have plenty of room for laydown on site.
Mayor and Council, yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. And then I did have another question, and I know we haven't talked about the interior, but you did mention it, and it's been mentioned a couple of times that I haven't. Where's the city attorney's office? I thought the city, and I believe we had a consensus for the city attorney to have an office where the mayor and council are located. And you just said in your presentation, the city clerk, the city council. I didn't hear the city attorney mentioned.
Mayor, Council, Councilmember Tommelchoff, within that same suite, we had a designated office for the city attorney.
In the basement.
Yeah, especially between his current location and when he's here on campus.
Okay, so there will be an office I don't remember seeing it, so I just wanted to make sure that was moving forward.
We can provide you a location if that would help.
Okay, thank you.
Question?
Thank you, Mayor. Are we still on track for completion in January or February of 2026?
Councilmember Turner, Mayor and Council, right now we are tracking the same schedule that we've had all along.
Okay, thank you.
And Councilmember Turner, it was first quarter of 2026, so it wasn't January. It was a little bit later than that.
Yeah, that's my mistake, I think. I'm the one that said first quarter. I believe the city manager told us in the public meeting it was January or February, and then last meeting said first quarter, and now it's become first quarter. But as I recall, we were told. But somewhere in that time frame, we're not pushing back far.
Yes, sir.
All right. Last time we were presented on this, a council member had a question about whether there was still flexibility in the design for the finished product to have departments move to different floors, or maybe they were even thinking about the council or whatever. And I believe the answer was no, which surprised me and others, because that was the whole concept behind this, was to build a flexible space that would be able to move down the road as departments grew in scope and size, or relationships between departments would change and all of that. So I hope we're way, in my opinion, too early on this to say that everything here is cast in stone. I know there are council members that are still concerned about the design and amenities provided on the garden level, and And so with a new council coming in, some of that could change, who knows? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bauer, item 2.
Velma Teague Library Design Study Update.
Mayor, members of the council, here to provide the staff report this afternoon will be Jean Marino, our Director of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Joining me today for today's presentation is our interim Chief Librarian, Dawn Farrow, and our interim Library Administrator, Kristen Fletcher-Spear. They're here to help answer any questions that you may have throughout the process. Before I get started on the details of the presentation, I want to talk a little bit about, and I want to begin today by talking about why we're here. So, as your Community Services Director over the last 4 years, I've come to council on multiple occasions recommending policy changes to really address the status quo and change the status quo for how we deliver services to our most disadvantaged and underserved populations in our community. Some of those things have included a fee waiver to support affordable development in our community, to change the way we deliver homeless services, supporting operations of heat relief respite centers here in Glendale, which we had never had before, increasing the number of shelter beds in our community, and co-locating our housing and human services programs at the System of Care Center, which we recently opened in conjunction with, or in partnership with the Glendale Elementary School District. Specifically for libraries, some of those policy recommendations have included going fines free, because when we looked at the impact of our fines on our community, we saw that we were disproportionately affecting low-income communities or low-income areas of our community. Additionally, we've added staff resources to increase operating hours for our libraries. We've launched a mobile app to make our program or our circulation materials more accessible to the community. We are expanding the Heroes Library to add a flexible community room, to add additional programming and community gathering space, as well as the addition of shade structures to allow us to do outdoor programming. We've also received support from council through resource allocation for automated materials handlers for Foothills and Maine. And we've refreshed security gates and self-check machines at all 3 of our older branches. The reason I share this with you today is because I have spent the last 4 years really advocating for the needs of this community, and I think it's really important to talk about some of those things. And today's presentation is going to be no different. I do want to go on the record to say that I both respect and appreciate the feedback that we've received from the community to date, and I'm going to talk in detail about that during the presentation. Many have stated that this is an emotional issue for them, and I understand. My role as a 30-year public servant for this community, I've served my entire career here in Glendale, is to try to separate out that emotion and really look at the facts and what we're trying to accomplish. I also have a duty to consider the voices that we are not hearing from, and those are the voices of future generations of children that will live in this neighborhood, that will need high-quality amenity at our Velma Teague Library. Many of whom will likely suffer from housing and food insecurity and other disadvantages. The children who need access to the best technology, equipment, and amenities to simply have a chance at a better life. The young parents who need free activities for their families, and older adults who need free social enrichment activities to keep them active in our community. An entire community that needs a safe and accessible amenities. That is the community that I'm here to talk to you about today, with the goal of creating the most technologically advanced library in our system, with amenities that we will not have in any of our other branches, to create a true destination for the people who need it the most. So today's presentation, I'm going to cover the design study overview and what we were trying to accomplish with this design study. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about modern libraries and what they look like, and some of the conditions within those libraries. I'll be talking about the program and amenities survey that we conducted, the current condition of Velma Teague. Then I'll go through the design study options that our consultant identified, as well as the summary of options and probable cost. I will be talking to you about the community feedback that we've received to date, and then a very specific staff recommendation that we'll be looking for consensus direction. So the design study overview. So essentially, we were asked to escalate the design study of Velma Teague in conjunction with the downtown campus remodel project to see if there was an opportunity to escalate the project. So it's currently programmed in the out years of our capital improvement plan in fiscal years 27, 28. As it stands now, that project in the future would require a bond election. There's a $7.1 million placeholder in there. As you know, that's just a placeholder with just general costs that we think could potentially be. So there's not currently funding set aside for that project. This is a 53-year-old building. And so a part of this process was to assess the current condition of this building and what the needs were of the community. I'm really looking at right-sizing our operational spaces, so looking at all of the spaces that we need for staff and circulation and gathering and meeting spaces and programming spaces and figuring out, okay, what's the right size for those spaces as compared to what we have now. But also very specifically understanding the needs of the Velma Teague community. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we have tried to assess the needs of that community very specifically. And then obviously I had mentioned, evaluating the campus as a whole, looking at City Hall, Murphy Park, and the library as a campus. And then finally, were there any opportunities to accelerate the project? So why is it critical to assess the needs of the Velma Teague? So this map here, the dark pink areas show what are called qualified census tracts. So these are low-income areas of our community. The stars represent the locations of our libraries. You can see down at the bottom of where Velma Teague is located, that particular library serves the lowest income areas of our city. These are the most economically disadvantaged populations in our community, but also the most diverse. So it's really critical that we assess what those needs are now and into the future. So what does a modern library look like? We talk about the library of the future. Libraries, when they were designed, especially this particular building when it was designed, were reference libraries, right? So you had card catalogs and you'd come in and you'd talk to a librarian and they'd help you do research. Very large stacks. So libraries have changed over time with the introduction of digital technologies and computers and different things like that. So what does a modern library look like? What's the amenity? And this is what we see in our industry. So these are just exemplar libraries from around the country, but you see a lot of use of natural light. You have integrated seating, you have resilient floor finishes, very flexible spaces so that you can adapt and adjust and meet the needs of the community into the future. You have freestanding furniture solutions and colorful accent paints. I kind of want to mention something here. So a couple of our libraries have very specific story time rooms where there's a sort of a stage. When you have a room like that, that's all you can use it for is story times. The goal with the libraries of the future, which is similar to the design that we have at the Heroes Branch Library, which was our most recent library that was constructed, is to create more adaptable and flexible spaces, a space that you can use for story time, but you can also use for many other types of programming. So that's really important in the design concepts for the library of the future. So this is a real life example of a library that has adopted these design principles. It's located here in our region. It's the White Tank Library. From any point, at any point where you're in the library, you have a 360 view of everything in the system. So they have low stacks, they're movable, so they can be adjusted. You do have these meeting rooms that have the glass fronts, so it does provide an element of privacy, but then also a visibility into those rooms. So it's a very open, modern design. You can see it doesn't have drop ceilings, and it has very nice lighting and natural light. So the current condition of Velma Teague. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the current things that are happening at Velma Teague and what we estimate the costs would be to address these issues. So practically every system or infrastructure item within the library needs to be updated and replaced. We know that the building has asbestos. It's safe to occupy, but you can't do any construction in it, which means that when we have to add electrical, you have to run it on the outside of the walls. So you have the power line channels that come down and run switches and things like that throughout the library. In addition, we have in our community room and our server room, we are operating off of a temporary AC unit because that's how we have to cool the building, and that's been like that for several years. So in order to address just the basic needs, the infrastructure of this building in its state today, we're estimating it would cost a little over $5 million. That's HVAC, your electrical, all of your controls, your low voltage. I'll talk a little bit about the entrance fencing and the design of the entrance, and then asbestos remediation. That would not be any changes to the footprint, and that building has hard angles, which inhibits visibility throughout the system, and I'll show you some photos on the next slides. It would be no improved amenities, no improved furniture or equipment. This is simply just to update systems. The other issue with this this particular option is that if we were to invest to address some of these systems, that would be sunk costs in the future if we did decide to do a full-blown rehabilitation of the building, in 27, 28. So basically anything that we spend on the building between now and the time that it gets rehabbed is sunk costs. So we would not get that money back, and we'd have to replace some of those systems. So this is verbatim from a report that it was a community assessment report that was conducted by a consulting firm in 2022, and this is very specifically about the Velma-Teague Branch Library. So I won't read everything on this slide here, but a couple of notes that I will point out. Patrons were noting that they are using other libraries because the one closest to them has not been updated. There's no study rooms or quiet spaces. The community room is cluttered and not adequate. Very specifically talking about, that's the place where we have to store stuff and program. And so when it inhibits our ability to do multiple programs in there. So staff, when they are scheduling their programs, the turnover between doing a story time and doing an adult book club, you have to turn that room around. It's very difficult, it's very challenging. So it's limiting our ability to improve and increase our programming at that facility. The book ranges are heavy and contribute to a dark and unwelcoming environment. Restroom fixtures and finishes are dated. There's no delivery entrance, and so deliveries are made through the front door, and so you have patrons and deliveries competing with each other. And then for a library, this is verbatim from the report, for a library situated in a park, views and even natural light are surprisingly limited. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the design issues on this building. So one of the things that was noted in the study that I mentioned in 2022 is that the scale of the library and its position in Murphy Park limits visibility. And you'll see, we did get some feedback from the community, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Sometimes people don't necessarily realize it's a park because of the lack of visibility realize it's a library because of that lack of visibility. The entrance to the library, this is again verbatim from the report. The entrance to the library does not create a good impression, mostly due to the age and general condition of the building, combined with a series of modifications over the years. So you can see the picture on the left here. That is the main entrance to the building. It creates a little alcove where people can hide. The design is just not good for today's standards. Additionally, we had brought the police department in to help us do an assessment of the environment. So it's crime prevention through environmental design. I think you might be familiar with that. And so they noted some of these areas that needed attention. So the front entrance obviously creates a place for people to gather and congregate when we wouldn't want them to. And so if we were to stay in this building and just keep it operational, we would need to address this front entrance by putting up some iron gates or something like that to prevent people from being in that alcove after hours. The mechanical equipment to the rear of the building also creates a place for people to congregate. Some of this might be being addressed as part of the downtown campus remodel project. But the front of the building, you can see, has those big concrete bollards. They kind of do a semicircle in front of the building. That also creates space between the roadway and the building for congregation. But then I also want to kind of point out that sign. That's our only sign for that library. So unless you know it's a library, you could probably drive by it every day and not really know what it is. The signage, just the sign package is inadequate and it's very difficult to see from the street. So on the interior of the building, I'm sure at one point in time, this nice blue wall in front of the restrooms was a really, really good idea. But in today's operation, it limits staff's visibility to what's happening back there. We can't take that wall down because we would have to do asbestos remediation. And so as a result, we ended up closing the rear entrance to the library just because it was creating some security issues and concerns. Additionally, you can see the stacks, they're very large, they're not easy to move. Modern libraries of today have stacks that are shorter, they're easier to remove, or they're easier to move, and then they have displays on the ends where you can do book displays and different things like that. And then this is just another photo from the desk, the front desk of the library. And so you can see, you can't see past that, what's beyond those stacks in the adult fiction area. So that's what the consultants were talking about, where the stacks are heavy and they contribute to a dim and unwelcoming environment. You see the drop ceilings and the fluorescent lighting as well. So the building needs a significant amount of work, especially if we want it to be a library of the future. So a little bit about the statistics of the library. So it's a 15,500 square foot facility. We have a little over 22,000 active Velma Teague patrons, and that means active within the last 12 months. We run about 10,000 programs, or we have about 10,000 program attendees per year, and we average about 18 attendees per program. One of the things that I want to point out, so we have about 100,000 visitors to Velma Teague on an annual basis. System-wide, it's just south of 400,000. So Velma Teague accounts for about 25% of all library visits throughout our system. But it only accounts for about 9% of our total circulation. So what does that tell us? That tells us that people come to Velma Teague not just for the books. They come for the programs, they come for a safe place to hang out, and they come for the community. The other thing that was very interesting and an insight from Holly Street Studios when they did the design study is that they noted that the Velma Teague Library is an attraction for popular special interests and arts and culture programs. So we looked at circulation by patron location, so where a patron lives and how Velma Teague circulation. So circulation means books being checked out. And the reason why we looked at this is because we needed to identify for our community outreach plan, who are we targeting for this feedback that we need about what are the needs for the Velma Teague Library. And so you can see that Ocotillo District accounts for about 35% of active Velma Teague patrons. The next largest category is City of Phoenix residents at 20%, which when I looked at this data, it kind of surprised me. So I kind of went and looked at where City of Phoenix libraries are located, and the Maryville residential neighborhood is in a library desert. And so the closest Phoenix library to them is Metro Center. So obviously Velma Teague is closer. So we are part of a regional system. It probably shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. But I think it makes sense. And then Cactus District residents. And then you can see very small percentages from the other districts in our community, a very small percentage from our neighbors to the west in Peoria. So then the next thing that the design consultants looked at is our operational spaces within the existing library. So spaces for collection, seating, circulation, staff, technology, and so forth. And then assessed those spaces and the size of those spaces against industry standards to see where we landed. So we were on target for seating and technology spaces, although the prior study noted that our computer corrals are taking up too much space and there's better technology out there. So we could probably have our technology space better leveraged. Our staff space was oversized and sort of discombobulated. It's a little bit maze-like back of house. And we were very much undersized on meeting space and then some of the other spaces like mechanical circulation and restrooms. Our assessment from our library professionals around our collection was that based on the current circulation, we could probably reduce our collection space in order to have more space for other amenities and programs. So then what we did is we did a programming and amenities survey. And so I mentioned that we wanted to focus on Velma Teague users very specifically. So this survey was targeted to Ocotillo and Cactus District residents exclusively. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about that because there was some participation from members outside of those districts, but that is who we focused on. So we hired Polco to do the independent survey for us. They ran 2 tracks. They did an address-based survey where they did a random sample of 3,000 households and sent out postcard mailers and invited them to participate in the survey. They received 2 postcard mailers. And then the second track was after that survey was launched, about 2 weeks later, we launched an open public survey. The open public survey was pushed out to an email distribution list that we have of 4,300 active Velma-Teague users. It was also put in our e-newsletters for the library, as well as put in the Cactus and Ocotillo District newsletters. So the results of that survey in terms of the respondents, so there's pros and cons to the 2 different types of surveys we ran. So there's on the address-based survey, that's going to be a reflection of your overall community, maybe not capture Velma-Teague patrons exclusively. So you can see 68% of those that responded to the address-based survey had a library card, and 51% visit Velma-Teague. Those are actually pretty good numbers. I was actually kind of surprised by that. On the open participation survey, though, that is going to be a reflection of your library patrons. And you can see that reflected by the fact that 95% of those respondents had a library card and 85% of them visit Velma-Teague.
Mayor,
Good.
over here.
Good.
Before we leave this slide, I'd like to ask a question pertinent to it. And that's that the surveys were targeted to the Ocotillo and Cactus District residents. And the district I represent, the Beryl District, comes as far south as Orangewood. And that's less than a half a mile. It's a short walk to this library. And I believe there's a lot of the residents that are in that zone between Orangewood and certainly Northern, and maybe even as far as another half mile or mile farther north, that are frequent users of this library. I just want to say I'm disappointed that we stuck to rigid district boundaries instead of looking, a little more holistically, which will be the word for the day probably, to include the residents closest to it.
Mayor and Councilmember Turner, I've brought you back to the slide where we looked at circulation by patron location. So the reason why we specifically targeted the Ocotillo and Cactus District residents is because based on our circulation, that is where our patrons are coming from. The Beryl District accounts for approximately 8% of Velma-Teague circulation.
Correct, and I suspect that most of that 8% lives within that southern half mile or mile closest to the library, and I think they could have been included. I think their point of view is important as well. Thank you.
So we also looked at, because one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we were also capturing are these active or regular users of the Velma-Teague library. So we asked, how frequently they visit the library. 38% of the address-based respondents had visited within the last 3 months, and 63% for the open participation respondents had visited within the last 3 months. We also asked the questions, if you don't visit Velma-Teague, what are some of the reasons for not visiting? These are some of the things that were noted. The one that, so lack of time, lack of interest, inconvenient location. The one that surprised me was unaware of its existence. So I mentioned previously that some of the feedback we had gotten from the consultant back in 2022 was the lack of visibility of the library because of its proximity and location within the park. And so this kind of affirms that we've gotten this feedback that there are members of the community that are unaware of its existence, and it could potentially be due to location and visibility issues, signage, and those types of things. So we also asked the question of what would encourage more visitation to Velma-Teague, whether you're an active user or not an active user, and these were the top things that came out of that survey. So arts and culture was the number one. So looking at art exhibits, maybe having some historical exhibits within the library, local performers, singers, and authors, maker spaces. So for those of you that may not be familiar with maker spaces, that's where people can come and create things. Sometimes people need access to specialty types of equipment like a glow forge, which is a laser cutting machine, because perhaps maybe they're starting a business and they don't have the ability to purchase this type of machinery on their own. So sewing, vinyl cutting, crafting, hand tools, Glowforge, 3D printing, etc. So access to that type of material and equipment. And then meeting and gathering space was also a big one. So having access to study rooms and quiet spaces, having access to outdoor spaces, and then meeting rooms. And then a library of things for checkout. This is something that is kind of a newer phenomenon in the library world, but it's where you can check out specialty types of equipment. So I'll just use the example of, I have a third grader, they want to go play t-ball. It cost me $50 to buy a baseball glove. Is it an opportunity where I can check out a piece of sports equipment from the library so that my kid can test it out and I'm not wasting $50 if they decide they don't like it? So it's that type of a thing. Another big one that I had heard from one of our longtime volunteers at the library, which I was very intrigued by, is cake pans, right? So Wilton cake pans, if any of you are bakers, they're very expensive to buy those specialty pans. Can you check them out from a library? They've seen library of things of those types of types of things at other libraries around the country. So the key survey takeaways, simply patrons want a place to gather, learn, and create. We need more meeting space and more programming space. We need flexible spaces for special interest classes, not just the singular community room that we have that is also our storage room. Incorporate public arts and programs, have more access to specialty equipment. The other thing that we asked the community is what are some things that you think that the library could help you with? And they noted that there's a lack of free recreational and social activities, lack of free gathering spaces, and lack of after school or summer activities for kids. So this is coming from residents from the neighborhood around Velmatique. So next I want to talk about the design study options. So Holly Street Studios, we began working with them last spring on the design study for Velmatique. And we talked a little bit about, they were looking at our space and what some of those options could look like if we wanted to have this library of the future, this modern library that we've talked about with some of these design principles. So this is an overview. I'm going to talk in detail about these options on the following slides. So there were essentially 4 options that were evaluated. So the first one was option 1, renovate in place. Option 2 was sort of redesign the building, and you can see that on the slide where it would kind of bifurcate the building as it is today and reduce it to about 9,700 square feet. Option 3 was relocate the library to the edge of the park on the north side near Glen. And then something that happened over the summer was option 4. So the city of Glendale owns the promenade at Palmyra location. It was built in 2008. It was intentionally or originally designed to be ground floor retail with a parking garage above it. That particular building was vacated over the summer by the former tenant. And so I was asked to take a look at it and see, could this potentially be an option for the Velmatique Library, recognizing that we are in the middle of a design study. So I went and looked at it first, and I said, yeah, I do think it has some potential, and I want to take my staff to go and look at it. And so we all went and looked at it and said, wow, this does have a significant amount of potential. It is simply 1 block north of the existing location, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the benefits of that location on the following slides as well. I do want to, before I leave off of the slide, I want to note that we did not do rough order of magnitude on costs for option 2, just because it falls really between option 1 and 3, and so the cost would probably be fairly similar
Jane,
on
hold
option
up a
2.
second. You have a question here.
I do have a question on slide 23. Of the roughly $8 million to relocate, how much of that, what is the cost to demolish the existing footprint?
So
How much is the cost to actually move the library, and then what is a separate amount of cost that would be spent to take down the library? And then I know there's a cost to, by the ton or whatever of demolition. So what would that cost be?
Mayor and Councilmember Tolmachov, if you'll allow me, I'm on slide 20 right now. I will be getting to those additional slides where I get into details about the costs, if that's okay.
I thought we had already gone through them. Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, so option one is renovating the existing building. So when we looked at this, one of the things that we needed to focus on is what is this going to look like in 27, 28, because it's unlikely that we'd have the ability to accelerate this project just due to the extensive nature of it. So it would be an extensive interior renovation, would still have those issues with the distance to the on-street parking and the lack of visibility from the surrounding streets. It's right in the middle of Murphy Park, so it does minimize how you can use the park, how you can activate that parcel as a park. Has that divided campus feel between the library or the street and City Hall. This particular option, and again, I'm going to go through these options and the estimated costs, and then I'm going to talk in detail at the end about all of the options together at once. This particular option we're estimating in future dollars would be about $17.65 million, and I'll get into details about what goes into that number on the following slides. As I mentioned, we did not cost out option two, so option three was reconstruct the library in Murphy Park. So it would be tearing down the existing building, reconstructing it on the north perimeter of the park. It would be about a reduction, about a 1/3 reduction in size, so bringing it down to between 10 and 12,000 square feet instead of 15,000. It would have a long construction timeline because you have to tear down that building, and then, it's a new build. So new builds are going to take longer no matter what. This particular option would likely require some improvements on Glen Drive. This option, however, would increase Murphy Park by about 12,000 square feet. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why that's important when we get to the community feedback section in just a little while. But again, due to the cost, it's unlikely we'd have the ability to accelerate. It would require a bond election in order to sell library bonds to fund this project. So option four, as I mentioned, this is something that we weren't expecting when we started the design study. It is an opportunity of timing that I think is important for council to be provided with information and to consider. It is an option that we've talked to the community about as well. So this particular option, it would be relocating the library 1 block north to the city-owned facility. It's 12,000 square feet. Would be a shorter construction timeline. We would obviously be able to take advantage of economies of scale because the construction's already mobilized, and we would be able to get this project done in conjunction with the downtown campus remodel project. It is a lower cost, and so we believe that it can be funded now without requiring a bond election. And as I mentioned in my opening statements, we have a community that needs access to resources, and when we looked at it from a staff perspective, we're concerned about the long-term implications of whether or not we'd have a successful bond election, and we know that the Velma Teague patrons and community needs these services and amenities now. So we do think that this is something that can be funded now. This would entirely open up Murphy Park. So the project could be done, I already mentioned the project could be done in conjunction with the downtown campus remodel. This particular cost estimate, the $7.89 million, includes, because we wanted to show you total cost of ownership of this option. So this includes $1.5 million for the park renovation and $500,000 for demolition and asbestos remediation. So it's not just the tenant improvement at the Palmyra location, it includes the park improvement as well as the remediation and demolition of the existing building. So I also want to just talk a little bit about the amphitheater project. So as part of when we were doing our community meetings, one of the things that we heard from the community was that the city was only pursuing this option of moving the library so that we could increase the size and the footprint of the amphitheater. You can see here, this is the amphitheater as it's designed. It has always been contemplated that it would work around the library. So the notion that that staff was making this recommendation to move so that we can increase the amphitheater is not accurate. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the reasons why, from the staff perspective and the operating perspective, we think that the promenade is a very good location and a very good option for council's consideration. It has immediate adjacent on-street parking on 2 sides of the building. It has attached covered parking. So one of the things that we do hear from our patrons on a periodic basis, and we've seen it documented through the the needs assessment that was done, where over 1,000 residents participated in that survey and process, that parking accessibility is an important feature for them, for their libraries. It would have improved street access. So this is a photograph of the building itself from Palmair, and this is sort of the main entry. So you can see it has a very long walkway between the street and the building. It already has the ADA accessible ramps to the side so people can park in the garage and come around. We also would obviously include ADA parking analysis as part of the overall design of the project and the building as well. And then you can see that one of the things that we got feedback from the 2022 Community Needs Assessment is having accessible outdoor programming space. So this particular facility already has a covered fence or a fenced patio where we could do outdoor programming. You could have leisurely gathering spaces. You know, I would envision it's possible that you could do something with the glass doors there and maybe create some, you know, open sliders similar to what we have at the Heroes Branch Library, something that creates more indoor-outdoor space for your library. And then the photo on the right shows the full-length promenade. So that entire neighborhood block is a really large promenade walkway that could be used for outdoor programming. As you know, one of our signature events that we do at Velma Teague is our LibCon event. We have, you know, lots of vendors. There was one year I remember staff had to move everything over to the City Hall campus under the eaves because it was raining. You know, this is a prime space for outdoor programming, especially for a library. So inside the building, it doesn't look pretty now, but obviously with comprehensive tenant improvement, it would look amazing. It's an open rectangular shell. So the reason why, from an operating perspective, that is enticing is because the design that we would envision is that from any point in the library, you could see the entire expanse of the library. So that helps from a staffing visibility, it helps for customer service, and it helps for security. It already has existing fiber, plumbing and electrical. The tenant that was most recently in there was running a call center, so they have, you know, exceptional fiber already to the building. And then it's a tree-lined street. You know, it's a beautiful area to walk. You know, the whole downtown area is designed to be a pedestrian accessible area. The size of the walkways and the promenade there is beautiful. It would have better natural light. So we do have windows, obviously, at the Velma Teague Library, but the stacks sort of diminish that. Right now in these photos, you can see that there's glazing on the windows. That was because the prior tenant didn't want people to see in. Obviously, that would be taken down because we would want that visibility into the library to see this as an active space and to entice people to come in. And then it is also the home of the Glendale History Walk. So for those of you that were here when the building was constructed, this was the art project that was incorporated into the building, and it shows the history of Glendale through mosaic tiles all across that promenade. And we think it would be a great opportunity to incorporate the rich history of Velma Teague at that location. And to revitalize, frankly, an underutilized asset. So one of the other things that we've heard from the community is nothing has ever been successful at that location, and it would be the kiss of death for the library. And what I would say to that is they are correct that no retail locations have ever been successful at that location. The library is not a retail location. The library is a destination. And we believe that this location, as with the investment of a comprehensive tenant improvement to make this the most technologically advanced library in our system, would be a significant attraction and a benefit for the community that visits Velma Teague today and into the future. So then the next step that the consultants did is they were checking to see, okay, based on what the size of spaces are that we need for this library of the future, could it fit in that space? And it was a positive fit assessment. They did 2 different options. You can see both of these options have a significant amount of meeting space and have right-sized the other spaces within the facility. So basically this was a test to see, could everything fit? And the answer is yes. So this is the summary of options and probable costs for all of the options we've talked about today. I put in option 0, which is basically do nothing except keep the building running today. That's that $5 million, a little over $5 million investment. That's in today's dollars. That is certainly an option for council's consideration. The next two options looked at are option one, which is renovate the existing building, and option two, which is relocate the existing building within the park. On both of those options, there's a couple of things that we looked at. So our engineering department uses a consulting firm that they do cost escalations. So they have cost estimators that do this professionally as their work. This isn't Gene coming up and saying, oh, it's a 17.4% escalation. So we escalated the cost to 2028 because we think that because of the cost of these renovations, we wouldn't be able to afford to do it today. So it's important to understand what that future cost would look like. So to escalate those costs, so in option one, to escalate that to $2028, it's a little over it's about $2.3 million. But then the other thing that was also really important to note in working with our facilities department is that we have to have some maintenance on that building now. We can't wait until 2028 with the building in its current condition. We would have to do the HVAC, we'd have to do the electrical, and we have to do the roof. Those three things we're estimating would be about $2.4 million. So we have to add that into what our costs would be. Recognizing that $2.4 million, if we invest it today, that's wasted money. We're not going to realize that investment into the future. So option one, $17.6 million in 2020, 27-28. Option two, 17.9 million in 27-28. Option four is the tenant improvement, which we've been talking about, 12,000 square feet. We're estimating that at about $7.9 million. But again, that includes $1.5 million for Murphy Park renovation because it would completely open up Murphy Park and allow it to be used as a park. And then also the $500,000 that it would cost to demo and do the asbestos remediation on the existing location. So next up is to talk a little bit about the community meetings and the community outreach that we conducted. So we gathered all of this information. We did our community survey to find out what are the needs of the community. We took that out to a community meeting. The community meeting was pushed out to, again, our 4,300 list of, or email distribution list for our Velmatique patrons. Was also pushed out to the Cactus and Ocotillo District newsletters, was put on the library social media. So it was very well publicized. We also heard later that the Glendale Historical Society also sent it out to their email distribution list as well. Even with all of that, we had about 20 attendees, which is good. I'm glad that we had participation for sure. At the beginning of the meeting, I asked just by show of hands, just for my own edification, how many people were Velmatique patrons, and about 4 people raised their hands. The majority sentiment after the conversation, and I've included the details of that conversation as an attachment to your materials today, the majority sentiment from that group was keep the library keep the Velmatique Library in Murphy Park because it's always been there, because it preserves Glendale's history, and because the promenade is not a good location. We also asked that same group to do an exercise. So upon coming into the meeting, everyone was given a comment card and dots to do a dot polling exercise. They were given 1 green dot to identify their highest priority and 3 yellow dots to identify lesser priorities. And we had pictures around the room put up of those same types of amenities that we had asked the community about on the survey. So things like meeting spaces and computer labs and different things like that. So of the 20 participants who participated, the number one thing that was identified by 17% of those that were in attendance was outdoor gathering space. That was their number one priority. Then next was meeting rooms at 11%, and then arts and culture, computer lab, and one-on-one assistance came in at about 9%. So we also collected those public comments at that meeting, but then since that time, since the public meeting, we also have collected public comments that have come in through the manager's office and mayor and council office, through the Velmatique branch, and then to me directly as well. So in total, we've received 20 unduplicated public comments. 14 of those came from public comment cards at that community meeting. We had 2 unduplicated emails from residents, 2 unduplicated phone calls, and 2 unduplicated Velma Teague comment cards. I will note that since I published this on Friday, I've received 2 additional emails. The results of the public comments that we received, 18 are requesting to leave Velma Teague in place, 1 was neutral, and 1 was supportive of relocation. So after the community meeting, we also went to the Library Advisory Board and made a presentation on October 9th. So for our Library Advisory Board, we do our citizen comments at the beginning of that meeting before any staff presentations. And so we did have 4 speakers to speak in opposition of option 4 at the Library Advisory Board meeting before the staff presentation. The board discussion was, there was a little bit of concern about the success of a future bond election. There was a desire to ensure a safe space for patrons, recognizing the current condition of the Velma Teague Library. They acknowledged the emotional attachment to the building, but also a desire to meet the community needs today if we can. And then they did say that if option 4 is to move forward with council, that they would request to have the legacy of Velma Teague herself commemorated at both the new location, the new Velma Teague location, as well as in the park. And they ultimately supported staff's recommendation for option 4. So I do want to point out that since the Library Advisory Board meeting, there has been some public concern that I believe has been expressed to the City Council about whether or not that meeting was posted appropriately. We do believe that the item was posted appropriately. However, I do concede that the staff report could have been more specific. I will say, however, the fact that we had 4 members of the public come out and speak in opposition of option 4 before the staff presentation does demonstrate to me that the public knew what was going to be discussed at that meeting.
Mayor, may I?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to say that I did receive an email from the chair of the Library Advisory Board, who is the Choya representative on the Library Advisory Board, and she expressed her high level of concern. I listened, by the way, I did listen, and I don't know if anybody else, I did listen to the meeting. And they felt, what I heard was a lot of pressure for them to make this decision. I think they were caught because some of the people already knew, the residents that showed up to that meeting had heard that this was discussed. I think the city manager, in fact, I know the city manager mentioned it publicly at a meeting before it had been presented in any formal fashion. So there were some people who knew. I don't think the Library Advisory Board was all that well aware of it, and I think they were, based on the chair, that my conversation on the phone and then my email, and then my conversation on the phone with the chair, that the library board was caught off guard by the position they were put in. So I just wanted to put that out there that I listened to the entire meeting. They weren't prepared to have this discussion. They really are not, maybe up to speed, whether they knew that they could table it or that they had other options. The chair said that they felt like they had to make a decision that night, and that's what they did. So I just wanted to publicly say that. Thank you.
Mayor and Councilmember Tolmachoff, so during the meeting, I agree, the Library Advisory Board had a very difficult choice to make. During the meeting, when I presented the information and I asked them if they were interested in making a recommendation to the council, they had some discussion amongst themselves, and there wasn't initially a motion made. And then there was a motion that was made to not support staff's recommendation to council. There was not a second for that motion. And so there wasn't a vote taken on that. And then the next thing that I said is, look, you don't have to make a recommendation tonight. I was very clear about that. I said it's entirely up to you. If you don't want to make a recommendation, you don't have to, and I will just report out to council what transpired at this meeting. Ultimately, a member of the board made a motion, another member of the board seconded that motion, and they took a vote. So I do agree that it was, and we had conversations, the staff, we had conversations with some of the members after the meeting, and they did say it was a very difficult position for them to be in. However, at least 2 of the members stated that, there's a concern about the current condition of the facility as it is today, And that if we have an opportunity to create an improved amenity for this population in our community now, that we should take advantage of that if possible. Ultimately recognizing it's council's decision. But I did make it clear to the Library Advisory Board that they did not have to make a decision during that meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Moreno. I would like to say, though, because it was brought to the Library Advisory Board, there was no opportunity for the council to say, possibly, I think I'm too far from the microphone, possibly add some other options to the, we hadn't had a chance. Normally, we send this to the commission, and then they make a recommendation, rather than them being presented with options that we hadn't even been presented with yet. And I'm just kind of curious, I'm wondering, why wasn't there an option to repurpose the building for some of the things that the community has asked for? Art opportunities, art gallery, meeting spaces, other things that building wouldn't have to be renovated for a library. If there was a consensus to relocate the library, why wasn't there any discussion, or maybe there was discussion and there was nothing included on repurposing the library to meet some of these other needs of the community? Meeting space for arts and culture, spaces for other opportunities to draw people into our downtown, which is the whole purpose of these investments. And the idea of that we would have to go out to bond, not necessarily. I mean, the council, we've got quite a bit of money in our fund balance, and we allocated 2 different times fund balance to Heroes Park, which were supported unanimously by everybody up here. But we have money for things to invest in things that are important to our residents without waiting for a bond, because I know we need parks bonds too. There wasn't money available. I've talked to Ms. Rios, and I know that fund balance was supplanted with additional ARPA money that was available, so it ended up not being fund balance. But when the discussion happened with the council, it was fund balance that was allocated to meet the needs and do things for the community, which were the sports fields at Heroes Park, and the total of that, the 2 different amounts totaled around $15 million. So, and the Library Advisory Board doesn't have all this information because this hadn't come to us first. So I'm just curious, I feel like there should be another option, that the building doesn't necessarily need to be torn down. If there's a consensus to move the library, there might be an opportunity for the building to meet some of the other needs of the community and another amenity to drive traffic into our downtown, which we've been trying to do for the 10 years that I've been on this council. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor and Councilmember Tolmachoff, obviously, any option that the council wants staff to pursue is something that we would pursue. The only thing that I would say is that regardless of the use of its building, whether as a library or some other community amenity, it needs a significant amount of work. It has to have asbestos remediation. It has to have comprehensive HVAC and electrical replacement. That doesn't change the investment that would be needed for that building, regardless of its use as a library or some other public use.
Mayor, if I could, I'm not suggesting that it changes that. What I'm suggesting is that if that's what the council decides to do, that we are able to fund that and not wait for a bond election. So, and I'm not exactly sure I understand what the hurry is either, that to get a decision on this, because we were just told that the city hall's another at least 18 months to go before we're ready to unveil everything. So I think we've got enough time to actually do this the right way and get, I mean, it's my understanding, I've received an email, I think it was an email, maybe it was a text, that there's hundreds of petition signatures. And I'm sure probably some of these people are going to be coming back tonight to give us some more information on the work that they've been doing in the community. But these assets belong to the members of our community. And I understand it's a lot bigger issue now and a lot more widely recognized issue throughout our community than it was whenever this other community meeting was. And I had an exact same experience when I was elected, and once I took office, one of the first things I found out was that city was pretty far down the road in the process of selling the Foothills Library. And we put the brakes on that, and we worked our way through it, and we invited the community to come in, and it became a big story. These things belong to the residents of our community, not to me, not to anybody up here. And maybe not enough people have been heard, but I do think that there's still another option, and that the option is always on the table for the council to fund things without having to wait for a bond election. I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I want to also make clear that I took the initiative to listen to the recording of the Library Advisory Board meeting so that I would know firsthand what went on, how it was handled. I also reached out to my representative on the advisory board and to give him an opportunity to share with me his impression of the meeting. And I'll just share some of the words that he used in that conversation that I quickly was plugging into my phone as we spoke. Surprised, caught off guard, public speakers knew more than the commission did, the decision had already been made, pressured, no time, agenda was what about to provide, not where to provide it. The agenda notice was about what would be to provide. And this was, he said, the first time that Gene had attended a library meeting that he could recall, and he's been on there a number of years. And they met, instead of in their normal meeting room, they met in the main library large meeting room. There were no information given to them about this presentation ahead of time, so they could have studied or gone out to see the libraries or to even go by and see the Paul Mayer building. So he, in essence, saying that he didn't feel like he'd been fully informed about the issue. And then I would like to also add to that my take on the agenda and the agenda's description is exactly the opposite. And I think as to whether or not having the discussion on relocating the library was properly noticed. And I think it actually speaks to it, because the residents who came to speak to the library board, they're pretty sophisticated Glendale residents. They're involved and know what's going on. And they understand that you have two opportunities in a meeting to speak, either during public comments for things that are not on the agenda, or during the agenda item under discussion if what you want to speak about is on the agenda. And they chose to speak during the public comments because they didn't see the subject on the agenda. And that, to me, indicates that the public wasn't informed, even the public paying attention, microscopically almost paying attention, didn't feel informed from the agenda that the conversation about relocating the library would be there, but rather a conversation about what to include in the library, which is what the surveys and all had been about, is what services or equipment and things like that to provide. And I have nothing but, Gene, I want you to know, and I think you do, I have nothing but the utmost respect for you and your professionalism, your 30 years of service to our community, and I think you are an outstanding city employee. But you don't work in a vacuum. And in listening to the meeting, a motion was asked for, nothing came forward. Finally, as you said, there was a motion to not do it that didn't get a second. And it was said that that the board didn't need to make a decision, as she described. But then they were asked 3 more times if somebody would make a motion. Is there a motion? Somebody want to make a motion, which is not exactly letting them just have, that's where the pressure, I think, comes from. So I'm concerned about all of that. And I'm also concerned that when we started this City Hall remodeling project, which, as we all know, has grown in scope massively from when we first talked about it, that one of the things we promised the community is that we weren't going to be touching Velma Teague Library. And that turns out not to be the case. And I feel that there's been on other issues, but here again, an erosion of public trust. And I'm concerned that at least those that are paying the most attention seem to have the least trust for what the city is doing. I also think we ought to quit using the downtown campus name for this. In our community, we have City Hall, council chambers, and amphitheater. Murphy Park is a separate thing to our community. The library is a separate thing within Murphy Park, but they think of those as individual things, and to throw them all into one bucket and call it the downtown campus is not how our community relates to it. I'm not sure how I feel about relocating the library, but I do feel that the process has not been sufficient. I think we need to be more holistic in our planning, we need to look at our downtown holistically and look at the feedback we've received, not just now, but in previous exercises about what our residents want to have downtown. Within the next 2 years, we're going to have City Hall completed, and the meeting rooms or whatever public space that's available there will be available. Art space in the library or in the amphitheater, I'm sorry, public performance and all of that they've asked for is going to be coming back downtown to the amphitheater. We also have the annex right next door that I assume will be vacated and become available again to the public, as well as what we formerly called the Bead Museum will also be vacated. Both of those are being used as temporary space for city employees that I believe are going to be relocated back to City Hall once it reopens. And then we have the whole improved upper floor of the adult center that also would become available as those employees move back to City Hall. So I think we need to take a holistic, not a 2-month look at downtown, but a 20-year look. What do we need to plan for our downtown for the next 20 years and consider all of those buildings and the other ideas that have come up. Things like an art gallery or a public art museum, also an entrepreneurial center for encouraging new entrepreneurs. It's quite possible that this Palmer site could be perfect for that. And some of the things that have been mentioned by residents about wanting to have in this library conversation could well belong in other spaces. Public meeting space in the former Bead Museum, the maker space in conjunction with an entrepreneurial center, because several of those things that are being talked about there actually relate to commerce. The laser designing and the 3D printing and those kinds of things, the vinyl cutting, all relate to that. So I don't think that we're in a rush. I think we have time to do this correctly and to take a more holistic view and to plan out exactly where we're going to be going, where we think our downtown should be going with the public buildings in the next 20 years. Come up with that plan and then start implementing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Moreno, what is the downtime without a library for all the options, whichever option you want to speak with? Like on this day, we're going to start doing option 1 and you'll be without a library for X amount of time. Option 2 has no library for X amount of time. Can you explain that, please?
Mayor and Councilmember Baldonegro, yes, I apologize. I should have talked about the timing of what would happen with any of these options. So obviously option 0, we can start working on the different improvements that need to happen. It's unclear at this point if with option 0, if we might have to shut down the library to do any of the asbestos remediation, depending on how much electrical has to get done. So there's a little bit of a question mark there if with option 0 we would have any type of a closure. With option 1 and option 3, you'd be looking at a longer term closure somewhere north of about 2 years, or south of about 2 years. One of the things that we would have to look at is continuity of operations. Could we have a small storefront located in downtown where people could pick up holds and popular items? Could we do programming at other community facilities? Obviously, if we went forward with option 1 or option 2 and it was in 27, 28, City Hall would be open. Could we have a small area within City Hall to provide some minimal library services? But we would really be looking at that continuity of operations to ensure that we could still meet the needs of the Velma-Teague community. With option 4, we'd be looking at about a 4 to 6 month closure of the library. Again, we would still also be looking at what are some of those opportunities to ensure continuity of operations, doing programming at some of our community centers. Could we partner with the school districts and use space at their facilities? Could we even do some programming here at the Civic Center or at other city facilities? So the options 1 and 3 would be a much longer closure time for Velma-Teague. Obviously, they're more significant projects. A tenant improvement is not that significant. The reason why there would still be a closure of Velma-Teague is in order to be able to mobilize construction that's already on site and to have the park renovation aligned to the completion of the City Hall project as well. The other thing, if I may, is I'd like to just note about the Library Advisory Board meeting. There was a comment that was made by Councilmember Turner that the advisory board was asked 3 additional times to make a motion. I just want to be clear, that was not staff that was asking 3 additional times if they wanted to make a motion. That was the chair. And that's part of her job, is to ask, if there's an opportunity to make a motion. So I just wanted to be clear. I made it very clear that the Library Advisory Board did not have to take action or make a motion to make a recommendation to City Council. So with that, the summary of options and probable costs we've already talked about. So the staff recommendation is option 4. This is based on our professional assessment. It's based on all of the community outreach that we've done, the feedback that we've gotten from the community about the amenities that they need, what we know about libraries of the future, and what those design concepts and principles look like. It does provide the opportunity to address the community needs now instead of 5 years from now or longer. It would create the flexible and adaptable space that we know that we need at Velma-Teague to help us improve programming. It would have improved amenities and make Velma-Teague an attraction. We would envision having equipment that is not accessible at any of our other branches. And one of the things that kind of came out of this process is, could the library, it's always going to be Velma-Teague Library. We want to definitely acknowledge that rich history that Velma-Teague, our very first city librarian, brought to the city. Although this building is not our first library, this building was built and constructed in 1971, and our first library, the actual building in City Hall, was in, I think, 1917. This Velma-Teague Library that we know today is actually the 3rd building. So with that, it would also include returning Velma-Teague, the space that Velma-Teague currently occupies, back to Murphy Park so that that park could be programmed. I do know one of the things that we've heard from the community is the preservation of Murphy Park, and because it is a central cornerstone of our community. I also we've already talked about it, but it does not increase the size of the amphitheater, and there are no plans for other commercial buildings as part of the staff recommendation today. So with that, staff is seeking consensus direction from council regarding the staff recommendation, and I would be happy to answer any additional questions.
And Mayor,
Go ahead.
Mayor, members, I would like to maybe address just some of the timing issues specifically that Councilmember Tommelchoff raised. One of the challenges of a project is, and it's like any building project, you don't start pouring your slab until you get the grading work done. You don't start framing until your foundation's down. I mean, everything kind of happens in a sequence. Where we're at currently is, if we do nothing, we need to give the thumbs up to our architect to finish the design of Murphy Park, which is part of the DCRP project. And they need a certain amount of time now to finish the design. And then we need an amount of time to do the construction and hopefully coordinate that so that when we reopen the campus up, that it's all the elements are open. So one of our challenges is that if the council's thinking about going in and maybe perhaps moving, if we waited a year, we will have designed the park and we will have done the space around it, and then you'd be going in and potentially taking down the structure or repurposing the structure for something else. So yes, the timing is, in a perfect world, we would love to have 2 or 3 years to kind of figure all this part of it out. We were just operating under the assumption that the council would not want to have other construction work going on, or we wouldn't be delaying the work on Murphy Park itself while we're trying to decide on on a potential relocation. So I'll just say, look, at the end of the day, we didn't know of this space being available a year ago in terms of it really being available. It was something we've had to put some accelerated time in as a result of keeping the project moving forward. But the council clearly could say, let's just keep the library where it's at. We'll be working on our CIP to come in and to start figuring out a schedule. And we can tell the architects to design the park in and around in and around the existing library. That is certainly an option, but we felt it was important to at least present to the council an alternative where we could have additional open space at the park, a new library that is kind of more technologically advanced, meeting the needs, and it might potentially be a win-win. And so Jean and her team have worked incredibly hard at a relatively condensed timeline to do this. But, again, we're just here to help provide you with good options. And so that's what we typically do is we come forward and we give you a recommendation based on our assessment, but we recognize the final decision rests with the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Phelps. So I guess why wasn't there any consideration given to repurposing the building? I mean, I don't know whether I am in favor or not. I haven't really decided of whether or not it's a good idea to move the library over to Palmer. But if that's what the consensus of the council is, it doesn't necessarily mean that the building has to be demolished and nothing there. I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity to do something else that would benefit downtown, another catalyst to bring people downtown, and arts. We've talked so many times about an arts. I mean, we had an art gallery at Westgate when I was first elected. We don't have an art gallery anywhere in the city anymore. I mean, I just think there's still opportunity to program that building where it is that would be would add value to what we're already doing. So I don't know whether I don't really know where we're at with this discussion. I do know that the chair of the Library Advisory Board would really like to have another crack at this. They feel like, and honestly, and I do want to say, Jean, you are, a tremendous employee, a tremendous asset to the city, and none of this is personal. It's what the feedback we're getting from our board members. But I don't like getting stuff handed to me when I sit down at a meeting and I have to make a decision right now on stuff that was just handed to me. And I know that's happened to us a few times, and I've spoken out against that. And I don't think it's fair to put our board members in that position to say, here's this presentation that they were completely unprepared to hear, and be asked to make a decision on the spot. So I don't know. I'd like to ask Mr. Bailey if there's an opportunity to send this back to the Library Advisory Board and give them an opportunity to digest this. And I would like to see an option added of repurposing the building and what that would actually be to be determined. But there's lots of things that the community said they wanted, and I think there's lots of opportunity as far as the city for another catalyst to bring people into downtown, to have that added as an option, and then the presentation be done again where they're now prepared to hear it and they have a better understanding of exactly what's going on. Can we do that?
Mayor and Council, the Library Advisory Board has just had it's your advisory board. If it is your will that you want them to answer a specific question, you have the ability to do that.
Mr. Phelps.
Yes, to answer the question as to why we didn't consider repurposing the existing library, that option's not off the table, but it would be premature to come in with the plan there without knowing whether the council had a desire to even relocate. So you have to first start with the decision, does the council want to relocate to that spot? Then it certainly opens up a host of possibilities. But again, we were looking at identified resources. And yes, the council can reprioritize resources. That always falls within your authority. But if we went to repurposing, again, just to touch that building requires about 5, and then the repurposing, you could be back up into by the time you do the 8 million for the new library, you could very easily be back into the numbers that were quite larger. And that wasn't our goal, was to get the council to spend more money, but you always have that ability. So again, that option's not off the table, but there's a logical progression here in terms of if the council doesn't want to move Velma Teague Library, it wouldn't make much sense for us to spend a lot of energy and time looking at reprogramming the existing facility.
Mayor, if I could, to respond to that. That's why I said earlier that generally, and at least every case that I can recall where we've tackled this type of an issue, it's come to the council first. We've had the discussion instead of going to the library advisory board and presenting them with options that council hasn't even been presented with. So I feel like it was backwards, honestly, that we've done this before with Glen Lakes. We've done it before with the Foothills Library. We've done it with a few other instances where we've said renaming parks and other things. That's brought to us first. We don't go first to the Parks Board and say, do you want to do this? Here's your choices, and then bring it to the council, where the council may bring up some other option that now you got to go back. And I would say that I would like to see if there's a consensus. I do tend to agree with the people who said that the Library Advisory Board meeting was not properly noticed, and I'm just going to read what the agenda says. It says, the Community Services Director will lead a workshop to gather feedback on a programming study conducted for the Velma Teague Library regarding the building design. Board members will provide feedback and have the ability to ask questions. Now, it does say it's noticed for action, but based on that, what that says, it doesn't say that they're going to be presented with options to relocate the library. It doesn't say anything about that. So I think that there's probably quite a bit of truth in the fact that it wasn't noticed and that the board did not have this information in advance. They wasn't emailed to them even a day beforehand for them to review the options so that they were prepared to make this decision. So I think we should send it back to the Library Advisory Board and give them an opportunity to have a more robust discussion about this. And I would say that the option to repurpose the building should be an option if the library's moved. Whether that decision is made or not, I don't know. But if the library is moved, there should be an option that, okay, if the two things go together, if the library's moved over to the promenade, that there is an option to repurpose the building. It doesn't necessarily have to be demolished, and see if there's people who would appreciate recommending that option as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I have quite a few comments I'd like to make. First, I'd like to address this coming before us at this time. I recall as in the last few years when we were discussing the remodeling of downtown, Jamie Aldama, Councilmember Aldama, made the recommendation that we need to include some planning for the library. And I agreed with that. And the council agreed, and that we actually set some money aside to do a study and include that. And I think that's where all this came from, is it's been an ongoing thing. We've been studying this since we started this process because we felt like it needed to be included. And what happened is an opportunity arose, an opportunity that didn't exist before. The opportunity to keep a downtown library, but possibly move it to a location. That didn't exist when we first were talking about remodeling downtown. So I think that is why it's coming up now and why it seems to be a little bit urgent, because it became available. As I look at the costs and as I analyze this whole thing, the costs seem to indicate that the downtown Velma Teague Library is quite expensive to remodel. And maybe we could come up with the money to do it, but we have an option before us that is much less expensive, that provides this better service, a better library, and open space and spaces for downtown that don't exist today. And that's what these options that we're considering now. So I think it's in the public's interest that as a steward of their public money, that we look at how much is this going to cost. Yes, we could refurbish, even if we moved downtown that building. But the feedback I've got from some residents is, no, they were afraid that that's what council wanted to do, is get rid of the library and then put something else there. And that isn't our intent. But I believe that is the sentiment that could be presented if that's what we end up doing. So I don't like the idea of taking a building that really is needing to be torn down because of the cost to renovate it, if that's the process, if that's what we decide to do. I don't think we should consider putting something else there, and I'm going to explain why in a few minutes. And I get that the board process could have been better. And I get that. I've been chairman of boards, and I know sometimes things come to us that we want more time to discuss and study. And maybe they didn't quite understand that they had the opportunity to do that. But we're here where we're at today. And I think we are where we are when we move forward. So what I wanted to do now is kind of go into a little bit of discussion about Murphy Park. So I have here a photograph. I believe this was presented with the Holly Street Studio Group when they first were looking at this process. And it shows the history of Murphy Park. So in 1930, Murphy Park was pretty much just a park with a little teeny tiny building there. And then in 1949, the park was still there and the library was expanded. And then in 1986, it was expanded to what it is today. Over the decades, the open space became more concrete. We had this park in the middle of concrete building. We had a green oasis in downtown Murphy Park. When it was donated in 1930, it was pretty much entirely just a park. Over the years, the library is bigger. As I explained, it got bigger. And then the footprint of Velma Teague over the last 53 years has been serving the public of downtown and the community. However, based on what was presented today, the public's need for both a park and a library have changed over the last 53 years. And so I think it's even going back to the original community engagement happened back in October of 2022, and then we were presented this information in April of 2023. There were several comments made about the library. They talked about, well, programming the lawn better, location of the library, rather than have the library, move the library to the Civic Center, or perhaps even to City Hall, make the park a destination, move the park into the library. So there was concern even back then that, you know, if we're going to do something with downtown, let's look into the park. And I think some of those comments is what initiated Councilmember Aldama to first make the recommendation. Let's include Murphy Park Library in this discussion. And so we did. From the discussion we had today, there are several things that was presented by staff. That we need more technology, we need an upgraded facility, we need better natural light, more meeting spaces, more welcoming, modern, safer place for the public. I think all those things were presented here today. And that's why I think with option 4, we're fulfilling that need. We are saving a ton of money and getting a new library. And I know it's quick, and there's some pushback from the community because they want this historic. But one thing we need to look at is we are taking back green space. We are getting rid of concrete in a downtown oasis of concrete and putting in green space and making it a park completely again. Is that not kind of what we should be doing? Creating more green space in a location that is building up more housing, more buildings, more concrete? I think that, for me, is a settling argument. Why we need to move forward with option 4. And with that, I'll just say that's how I feel we should move forward.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I concur with Councilmember Malnar's remarks, and I'll try not to duplicate but I appreciate your comments, and it was well said. Thank you. There are a couple of things that I'm going to talk about. One, everyone seems to forget that this is for the kids. A new library, a high-tech library, will help to bring a disadvantaged population into the 21st century. It's about the kids. It's not a vanity project. It's not a historic project. It's not a project to be used to dissent just for the sake of dissent, which is what this has turned out to be. So I think it's really important that everyone keep in mind that we're talking about children and what we do to best serve the needs of the children in our community. There was a comment made that we need more time to do this right. Well, that implies that it was not done right, that somehow or another staff had some ulterior motive. Nothing could be further from the truth. This staff works each and every day to make Glendale better, to fill the needs of the community's residents. And I resent the implication that somehow or other this is staff's fault. It's not. Next, there were over 200 respondents. 57 were address-based, 145 open participation. That's over 200 residents that weighed in on this. How much more public comment do you want? Do you want to be dragging people in off the street who have no interest in the library and could care less? These 200 people exhibited an interest in the library and took their time to respond. I think that's important to note as well. Next, this will provide an improved amenity that meets community needs. That is an important distinction to make, that we are pairing an improved amenity that also happens to meet community needs. It is not a project that should be based on sentiment. Well, the library's always been there, or well, the building's always been there. We need to keep it. For what? As Councilmember Malnar did say, when the last crop of dissidents were opposed to the DCPR project, one of their comments was, well, we need park. Well, with the removal of this building, you get more park. It's exactly what you wanted a year ago. Now you don't want it? It doesn't make sense. Talk about the opportunity to save this building for future programming. We will have opportunities for future programming for arts and a museum. We're going to have the annex. We're going to have the bead museum when those buildings are vacated. I would love to see the annex turn into a Smithsonian rotating exhibit museum. That makes more sense than some of this cockamamie stuff that I've heard today. This is a good project. It fell into our laps at the right time. It wasn't brought up earlier because it wasn't available earlier. But we have an opportunity to make a life-changing experience for the kids in Ocotillo and Cactus, and yes, even South Barrel districts. And they deserve it. That's what this is about. To give them a library of the future. To give them a leg up on their futures. It's not about a building that's seen its fourth version. And I just get so worked up when I hear some of this stuff that's being said. It's all smokescreen. It's all because there are dissidents out there that either don't like the majority of this council or don't like senior management. So whatever we propose, they're going to oppose.
Mayor, I believe
No,
we have a
I'm
code of
not
conduct
finished.
that
I'm
disallows
not
disparaging
finished.
other council members,
I
and I believe
reclaim my
Councilmember
time.
Clark has just violated that code of conduct.
Mayor, I reclaim my time. So, what I am saying is,
Limit on time.
don't waste this opportunity to do something for the kids. Put all the other junk aside and think in terms of the kids. That's what this is all about. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Hugh.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree with several of the council members that made great comments. It did just fall into our lap that we could do a library at option 4. And when that happened, I thought, great, this would be wonderful. I agree, the library, when it's gone, will enhance Murphy Park, make it just so much better for downtown Glendale. There's parking to get into option 4. I think it even opened up maybe to the shops, people wandering farther north and enjoying more shops in Glendale. I think it fell in our lap and it makes sense. It'll be faster, quicker, and it's going to be a very nice high-tech library. Thank you.
Hold on. Did you have?
I have a few comments and then a couple of questions for Ms. Moreno again. I listening to everyone's input is important, especially out in the for the public. One of the things that bothered me that came to my attention was a neighbor of mine who uses the library often. She has I won't say her name, but she has a very severely handicapped child, and she cannot get out very often, and she goes to the library for books, and so she usually gets like 5-10 books for the week, and that's her entertainment. And she came to my door frantically, knocking on the door after the library committee meeting had their meeting, and she was upset. Not because of what the meeting was, but because what she's been seeing and hearing online. That and she, I don't want to say confronted me, but she said, "Why are you doing this?" And I said, "You know me. I'm not going to lie to you. What are you talking about?" And she says, she gave a very one-sided perspective of this whole situation. And when I explained, look, they just had a meeting to make a recommendation. They're going to bring the recommendation to us. We haven't voted on anything. We haven't even had a discussion about this. Nothing's being had. It was just a meeting being done. And she looked right at me in the eye. She goes, "That's not what I heard." Okay, well, then I explained everything again. I said that these are, from what I understand, these are the options. These are the pros and cons for every option. And at the end of that conversation, she says, "Okay, I trust you. I feel a lot better now, but that's not what I heard." She said, "Why would they say that?" And I said, it's to rile you up. To rile you up. It's easy for someone to give you one side of the conversation and not give you both sides so that you can make your fully informed opinion or judgment. Now, on Saturday or Sunday, her sister asked me the same question. And they know me since I was a baby. And I explained to her, well, let me give you all the details. And then when I was done, I said, I didn't give you all the details to sway your opinion. I gave you all the details so you would be informed of both sides of the topic. I mean, that's what I should be doing as a councilman, is letting you know all the details. If I only give you half the story, it's because I want you to know half the story. If I give you the whole story, it's because I want you to know all of it, so then you can make an informed opinion or judgment on it. But if you're only hearing half the story from social media or from whoever, it's because they don't want you to know the whole story. Because if you know the whole story, it might change your opinion or mind on that, and that's neither fair or right. And I told her, I'm not.
Next.
telling you everything to change your opinion on this. I just want you to know everything. So then that way you can make an informed decision. And she thanked me for that. And I think that's what we should be doing. I remember when Velma Teague was the only library here, and I remember because I went to Old PH and we had a library there. It was very small. So I would come to Velma Teague, and it was tough. And then when they opened up the main, Glendale, Maine off of 59th Avenue, and we went there, I went there for the first time, excited for a big new library. This is gonna be great. And I got there, there was nowhere to sit. There was nowhere to, all the tables were being had. It was a beautiful place, but I remember getting the book I needed and then having literally nowhere to sit. And I would sit on the floor just so I could try to write notes down, all that. And I remember people walking by and looking down at me like, you don't belong here. What are you doing here? And that bothered me a lot. It really did. And I came back to Velma Teague Library because this is my library and it's where I live. It's our library. But it bothered me. And after hearing everything, I think it would be like unbelievably incredible that we could have something state of the art, better than all the other libraries in Glendale, no disrespect to the other ones, for the kids in the community, for the patrons in the community, for the parents that can't get out very often in the community, to be able to say, this is our library. It's the best one we have right now in Glendale. This is ours. And I think that's also important. I've heard people say that the location on Palmer, and this is their words, not mine, the armpit of the city. Those were their words, not mine. And I don't really like, I love Glendale, and I really don't like it when people from Glendale say stuff like that. I don't care for that. What they could say is, it's never been a successful location for any other business, and I would agree. I could not disagree with them. That's absolutely true. But I also understand that a library is a destination. You don't just go walking around and then, oh, well, hey, look, there's a library. Unless it's like in a major metropolitan area and you're visiting that city. If you live in that city, you're going to the library, and when you have to go to the library, that is what it is. It's a destination. So it would, to that point, it would be successful on Palmer. It may be the only thing that may be successful on Palmer, given the logistics of everything. I am not comfortable saying okay to a $5 million Band-Aid that we could never use again. That's a lot of money for a Band-Aid that apparently has been needed for a long time from this presentation. That doesn't sit well with me. I appreciate Councilman Melanar's comment about we're here now. And sometimes, and all of you in the audience will understand this, sometimes you get put into a situation you don't like, and it's an uncomfortable situation. But the timing is what it is. And that's why people, parents, directors, managers, council, that's why we are where we are, because we're supposed to make tough decisions. From the beginning, when I spoke at that podium about being a finalist for the position, that day I said, I will always respect and value the rich culture and history and tradition of Glendale, and also embrace the future. You can look it up on the channel as I said that. I have to stick to those words. We have things kind of change, things evolve. Change isn't easy. It's very uncomfortable. It's unknown. But if we sit stagnantly and don't do anything, that $5 million Band-Aid may become much, much higher. If we take our time to figure out a better solution, in future years, it could be $20+ million. And then we're going to have hundreds of people outside saying, why did you guys waste so much money taking so much time to figure this out? I also know in this community, I've lived here all my life. I also know in this community, a lot of people do not speak up if they like something. If they want option this or that, they They don't speak up. They don't come to meetings. They don't want to get in the mix. They want to make sure that they have the right people in place to speak for them and do the right thing. And that is a big part of the community I live in. They do not want to speak up. They'll talk to me privately, but they will not go to that podium. They will not be outside with cards. They will not, that's just not what they do. And then finally, it was brought up that the library committee may have been overwhelmed or confused or didn't know what to do, and they were kind of rushed, or they were whatever. And I will say that, you know, I have one question. When it came to voting, what was the voting count for option 4?
Mayor and Councilmember Baldenegro, it was 6-1, I believe.
So one person said no, and the other 6 agreed, based on the facts in the presentation, that they were comfortable enough to say, I suggest option 4.
Mayor and Councilmember Baldenegro, that's correct.
Okay. I just don't necessarily, I mean, and this is, I mean, as you all know, I just got here. This is my first foray into a very difficult, sentimental, and emotional situation, and I get it. I get it. However, we have to do what's best for the situation, and if there's and by just saying, well, we'll just wait, well, that shouldn't be an option. I mean, it is an irresponsible option. The longer we wait, the longer it's going to take. And one last thing I'd like to bring up. I worked for the school district for 17 years, and I've met some amazing teachers and principals and so forth. And when I talk with them and I ask them about like certain things, like how is it hard, how much harder is it for a kid to get ahead or to fall back if they fail a class or they're held back or anything like that. And they say stuff like, you know, if you're held back 1 year, like if you just don't pass from like 4th grade to 5th grade and you're held back 1 year, it takes about 2 to 3 years for you to catch up. It literally takes about 2 or 3 years. And by the time you get to 8th grade, you're still not ready. And they're just, you know, unfortunately, you're barely making it. You're barely making it. You're barely making it. And you get to high school and you're barely making it. When you get to out of high school and you probably weren't ready to be ready. But we have options here that are saying we're going to be without a library for possibly up to 2 years. And if possibly, if she said no, she said 4 to 6 years for option 4, options 1 and 2, because they were relatively close, between 18 to 20 and 24 months is what Ms. Moreno said. So we have possibly 2 years without a library for the most underserved area in the city. And people are comfortable with that. I'd like to know how many of you have kids that are in the school district right now that are comfortable with that. Because those kids become citizens. They work with us. They work for us. They work, I mean, I don't know how you can be comfortable with that. Now, I don't even like the 4 to 6 months without a library. That's a heck of a lot better than 18 months to 24. And for anybody who's signed any kind of online petition, I want to look you in the eye and ask you, how are you comfortable with that? That is a huge detriment to the kids. And not just the kids, but to the patrons. To the lady I just described who cannot get out of her house because she has a severely handicapped son. Well, that's just one person. So it's okay. I mean, we need to be very responsible in our words and our actions, as that's why we are here. And I think that we also need to be responsible in giving out the entire story. The fact that a lot of stuff is being said online or a lot of stuff is being said out in public that is just severely to one side is wildly irresponsible. I'm not doing this for political gain because I'm not worried about that. I'm doing it for what's right for the city, what's right for the kids, and what's right for the patrons. I've said that from day one. I'll be doing it for as long as I'm here. And it'd be nice if we really, really make sure that we do what's best for the people that need it the most, and not just what's best for something else that's not as important as that. So thank you, sir.
Bush, were you done? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Moreno, can I ask, when did the Library Advisory Board, were they handed a paper copy of this at their places when the meeting started, or did they just see a PowerPoint?
Mayor and Councilmember Tolmachoff, they were given handouts for the meeting.
But it was waiting for them at their seat when they sat down?
Mayor and Councilmember Tolmachoff, that's correct.
Okay, so, and that's the point I was trying to make, is that they had no opportunity to be prepared. I mean, as a commission member, if I was a commission member, I would, and I think we should afford the people that are serving on our boards and commissions the courtesy of giving them information, giving them the packet ahead of time so that they can be prepared. And that's the point I'm trying to make. Not that they're complaining, but the chair of the Library Advisory Board was honestly stunned that they were given this and basically asked to make a decision, and her words, felt pressured to make a decision. So, I mean, I can count, I can see how this is going. But I had said in the beginning that I am open to relocating the library, but wondered why there was no discussion about repurposing the building. The figures that you gave us were to turn that back into a library. To use the building as a shelf or an art gallery or other things would be a different cost, I believe. Obviously, the building needs maintenance. We've got lots of deferred maintenance on buildings all over the city. But I guess, you know, like I said, I can count, I can see how this is going, but I want to hear it from the council member who represents this district that you're comfortable moving forward today without any further discussion in moving the library, which I think, you know, has a lot of possibilities. I'm not opposed to that. And also demoing the building without any further discussion on what the building could be used for.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
So I've had discussions with business members downtown, business members around the city, and residents, and they want something that's going to help bring people downtown Glendale, which is what you said earlier, I believe. That's been something that we've always been needing to work at, is bringing more people downtown. With no disrespect to Velma Teague, I from what I've read in the last few months, it seems like she was an amazing woman. I will never deny that. I didn't know that it was an actual park before the library. And I've heard so many people say many times, that's not a park. It's a building with landscape around it. And they say it, and I don't say it like that. They say it like that. And a lot of people have said, can we just bring back the park and open, I think Councilmember Melnar said, a green oasis, if I'm saying it correct or not. But it seems like there'd be so much more better opportunities if something like that were to be available. I don't like that we're in this situation. I just got here. So it's not like I was here 2 years ago when you guys are starting this conversation. I don't like that this building's been needing maintenance for several years now. Again, I wasn't here several years ago, but I'm here now. And I don't have a problem standing up and speaking up for what I believe is right. I don't have a problem standing up and speaking up what I believe is the right thing to do. I don't like a $5 million Band-Aid that will never recover. We'll never be able to use that. Whatever we use for that building, we'll never be able to recover again. I don't like that future money could be higher. I don't like that either. You know, I don't like the time without a library. And again, that's a big deal, a really big deal. And I also think that with my experience, and I'm sure his experience with other kids in this neighborhood, that we get looked down on. So now we're going to have something really spectacular in our district that we can say is ours. Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we? And they're going to bring their parents to drop them off at this library. And if they say, like as my dad was, because he was working so long, he couldn't just, take me everywhere I wanted, I'm sure their parents are in the same situation or worse. And they bring their kids to the library. If it's at the Palmer location, they can go somewhere across the street and grab a bite to eat or something else while the kid's in there getting his homework done or her homework done or whatever they need to do. It's going to, Mr. Mellon made a really good point. It can't be misunderstood that more than likely is going to help Catlin Court. If more people are going if that becomes a destination 1 block north closer to Catlin Court, there is nobody that can tell me that's not going to help Catlin Court. I don't know how that it'd be the opposite. And it just seems to me that we're in again. I agree. 2 years ago, I would have liked to have this conversation 2 years ago. I wasn't here 2 years ago. I'd like to have this robust conversation 2 years ago, but I wasn't here. I'm here now. And again, I don't mind standing up and speaking out for the right reasons. And my opinion is this. Whatever I do when I'm in this seat, I will do with an open mind and a peaceful heart. Open mind and peaceful heart with everything I decide to do. You may not like it, you may not agree with it, but it's not out of spite or anger or stick it to the man or whatever. It's nothing to do with that. It has to do with the situation we're in. And sometimes we don't have a hand in avoiding that situation, and I find myself in that situation. If I don't know how else to explain that, but that's how I feel, and I'm confident there's a lot more people that feel the same way. If I were to go to talk to the kids in the schools and talk to the teachers of schools and talk to the librarians, I'm confident that they would probably want option 4. They would probably have more questions. They'd be like, yeah, so how soon can we do this? Would probably be the first question. How soon can we do this? If I'm going to say it like this, because I read a lot about Velma Teague in the past few weeks. Sounded like an amazing lady. If Velma Teague was here today, and I am not disparaging her spirit or anything about her when I say it like this, so please understand that. If Velma Teague was here today and was still alive, from the mid-'80s to today, and to see the advent of the internet and everything else, and the Dewey Decimal System going away, and everything else, and some of you don't even know what that is, but look it up, and all that happening, and moving forward to the future, I would say that if she was still alive, she'd be like, man, I've seen a lot of changes, and a majority of them were really good to help the kids or help the patrons, and this is another one. We're going to be able to have a state-of-the-art library with amenities that we'd never had before. It's going to be safer. It's going to be convenient. It's still going to have my name, though I don't believe she would have an ego or a vanity issue about it, but it's still going to have my name on it, and they may honor me at the park with something else in its place. And it's going to be a cost so much less to the city. I would think she would say, because she was probably a very smart lady, that's a no-brainer. Because the money we save for the city, we'll be able to do other things for the city, for the kids, for the patrons. We'll be able to do more. And we still keep the park, and we still keep the library. And they'll be better because probably even be better because they'll be separate. I have a feeling if she was here today, God rest her soul, that she would probably say something to that effect. I'm assuming. I don't know, but I'm assuming. But I know one thing. Last 17 years working with teachers and librarians, they want to do the right thing for kids. They want to do the right thing for kids. Closing a library for 2 years isn't doing the right thing. Spending a bunch of money, a $5 million Band-Aid, is not doing the right thing. Moving it 1 block north to a destination where it would still survive as a destination because no other business survived there because it wasn't the right business, but a library would. It would make sense. And because of the timing of it all, she may say, and I would assume because I've met, as I think back to all librarians I ever had, she would probably be excited. She would probably be really excited. What a godsend. This opportunity presented itself at this time where we're able to do this. I really believe she would say that. Could I be wrong? Everybody in this room could be wrong. I'm pretty confident I'd be right, though, because she was a librarian. I mean, how many horrible, ugly, mean librarians have you ever known in your life? I haven't known any. And I knew the ones at ASU main campus. I mean, that was like a different animal over there. Every librarian's sweet and nice. They just want to help you. They know where the books are at. They tell you where it's on the shelf. They memorize it. This is their life. This is their livelihood. This is what they do for a living every single day. This is their passion. And we can make it better. It's a no-brainer. If I answered your question, it's a no-brainer.
Oh, yes.
Okay, all right.
Mayor, I do have one more question. I'd like to know where the $8 million is coming from. Now, $2 million of that has to do with the demolition of the building, which Councilmember Baldwin-Nager was in favor of, without any further discussion. But where is this general fund? Where's this money going to come from? Thank you.
Mayor, members of the council, yes, it would come from general fund.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say my thing, and then we're going to go ahead and ask for consensus. I see people in the audience that, believe it or not, it's probably been close to 3 years that I think we originally talked about our reconstruction of our city hall. Is it not? About 3 years. And I distinctly remember people that are sitting in this audience right now and other people showing up angry because we were going to knock down all the trees and tear up all the shrubs and do all these horrible things. And I see people nodding their head yes. Here's an opportunity to have more shrubs, more green space, and really take the investment that we're putting in to our city hall right now and make that really stand out. At the same time, it gives people a better opportunity to enjoy a real park. You know, and I think of Velma Teague, you know, I'd asked Councilmember Hugh how many libraries there were, being that he's been here for like, what, 300 years now? Close. Something like that. And actually, Gene had said that that is the third library, this being the fourth. I don't see any disrespect. I don't see any negative at all about growing and offering more opportunities for our citizens. I see none. If it's approximately 400 feet, I believe, from where the library currently is now to where the new library would be. And if people think that's too far to walk, keep in mind you can park in the parking garage, which is considerably closer, in the shade, and if it's raining, you don't have to get in the rain. Right now you have to. There's no way that you can get into our current library without walking out in the heat or the rain. There's no way. I don't know why we would not want to take the investment that we've made and make it look even better. I don't know why we wouldn't want to continue honoring Velma Teague. I don't think it's the building. I think it's the name recognition and what she meant to the city. I've said this in the past. I'll say it again today. I firmly, truly, 100% believe that our downtown is the soul of Glendale. And I think people too frequently forget that. We have people in downtown that live in an area that struggle on a daily basis to simply survive. And we all know that. It's one of the most impoverished areas of not only Glendale, but of the valley. They struggle. And why not give every opportunity possible to the young people that are wanting a better education, better opportunity for the most the newest opportunities for electronics. I mean, that's what it's all about anymore. Books are getting less and electronics are getting more. I don't see a huge, I guess I don't understand why people are so wound up about this, other than just this Saturday we had, some of you may or may not know, Glendale had its annual GAIN event. And I don't know how many stops I made. I think I made somewhere between 8 and 10 stops that night. And in multiple locations, I had people literally come out and say, why are you guys getting rid of our library? Period. That was the end of discussion for them. And when I told them that, first of all, no decisions have been made. It's coming up to council. We'll discuss it. We'll move on. But at the same time, the intention was never to get rid of a library. It was simply to move to a better location that will offer more services that, bottom line, will save tremendous amount of tax revenue, expenses for the city. I myself, and I think every member on this council, takes great pride in the fact that we haven't raised our property taxes. I think we take great pride in it. We try as hard as we can to be very frugal with taxpayers' money. This is one of those instances, if you look at every opportunity, this is by far the least expensive that will give us, in my opinion, the best opportunity, the quickest way for the most education for these kids. I don't see a downside to it. I just don't. So, like my family, I can't please everybody every day all the time. My wife, 42 years, I do a really good job with her, but there are days that we still don't agree on things. And this is no different. We are going to make decisions on this council that will upset some people and make other people happy. But we don't work for an individual. We work for our city. Each council member represents their district and also a vote for the city. I personally support this number 4, option number 4. I think it makes the most sense. I think it's the quickest, allows our kids to continue as the most as far as opportunities for library, and keeps our taxes down, keeps that expense down. And I think that's incumbent upon all of us to do that as much as we can each and every day. So I'm going to ask for, is there a consensus on option number 4? If we don't have that, then we'll move on. Okay, so we do have a consensus on option number 4.
Thank you.
Ms. Bauer, item number 3, if you would, please.
Solid waste rate review, fuel and insurance impact.
Mayor, members of the council, here to provide staff report will be Michelle Watenko, Director of Field Operations, and Michael Carr, Deputy Director, Field Operations.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Actually joined today as well by Amy Moreno. I believe many of you have met her before. She's our former solid waste superintendent, and I say that because she has recently been promoted. So she is now a deputy director in field operations, and very pleased to have her on our team and progressing forward in her career. We are here today to talk solid waste residential rates. So these are the rates that impact our residents. These are not the rates that impact any commercial customers. We're going to go through today with you background of how we got to where we are, why we're here, what our rate covers, the trends that we're seeing, the pressures we're seeing on our rates, what we're doing to mitigate it, and some recommendations from staff. Prior to getting into the presentation, I do want to state that we did take this to the Citizens Utility Advisory Commission. This was taken to them on October 2nd, and we did get their direction to take this forward to council. So our prior presentation we did to council when we talked rates was in June of 2022, and at that time, Councilmember Tomelshoff asked that we do more frequent continuous rate reviews, and we do those now on a regular type basis. And so recently in doing it, we do see a lot of stresses on our fund, which we'll get into in detail here. And we do a regular review of the health of the fund. And as you can see, this slide does show our current year FY 24-25 budget as the first column there. With contingency, it does show us drawing down fund balance of just over $2 million this year. And while our ending fund balance still meets policy, you can see that ongoing, we are continuing to draw down fund balance. And so we opted to do something sooner than later to come to council with options or with our recommendation for that. These overall inflationary increases will be discussed in more detail as we get into the presentation. But the revenue shown on this slide, our operating revenue, does include all council-approved revenue increases. So any rate increase we have today is included in this. And now I'd like to turn this over to Amy Moreno to go through what the fund covers, the services provided by these rates, and what we've done thus far to try and mitigate any rate increases.
Thank you, Michelle. Solid Waste provides a wide array of residential services that are included in the monthly residential rate. Listed on this slide are all those services along with some fiscal year 24 collection data. We provide a weekly mandated trash and recycling to over 57,800 households, collecting 71,000 tons of trash and 9,450 tons of recyclables. If you think about it, we provide over 6 million individual services a year. Another program within solid waste is our street sweeping program, where residential streets are swept monthly to control dust for better air quality, keeps debris out of gutters and storm drains, and removes dangerous materials off streets like nails, glass, and small rocks. In fiscal year 24, 18,600 lane miles were swept. I would like to mention that no other city has this service within their solid waste program. The division also offers curbside biannual household hazardous waste events in which 26,160 pounds were collected by a vendor in fiscal year 24. This service keeps hazardous materials out of the water system, out of our trucks, away from our staff and community, while providing proper disposal. In addition, we offer a monthly bulk trash collection program. The team collected 21,000 tons of material from Glendale residents last fiscal year. Many other cities do offer a monthly service, but they do so with collection limitations. The Solid Waste Division also offers other services such as litter patrol, illegal dumping collections, and alley access control. And these services are not included in other city solid waste programs as well. And lastly, we have a free container replacement program and an inspection service that ensures compliance of our residential and bulk trash collections. In this slide, I'd like to discuss some of the efficiencies we've had. So the division is always looking to enhance, streamline, and reduce expenses and improve our services. Some efficiency highlights I would like to point out achieved in fiscal year 24 are the 45,500 route miles saved in the year by optimizing 57 residential refuse routes. And by optimizing those routes, it also assisted in greatly reducing overtime hours by 20%. As you are aware, we are diligently working on a recycling program, including that includes universal messaging, educational outreach, and changing the color of the recycling containers to blue, which is a common color indicating recycling. The team has received positive feedback from the community, stating that the color is easier to identify the recycling container from the trash. The containers are used as replacements for damaged ones in the field and in areas that have been identified with high contamination. All these enhancements have greatly aided to decrease our contamination rate from 29.5% in fiscal year 23 to 20.8% in fiscal year 24, resulting in a lower processing fee for the recycling materials. Ongoing improvement goals for this fiscal year is to implement 41 optimized recycle routes, to continue with the reduction in route-driven miles, which will help to reduce vehicle maintenance and fuel costs, as well as a reduction in overtime. We are also participating in an internal audit review of our bulk trash program. One item that will be studied is an on-call service. We will bring any recommendations for efficiencies to council. We are also sampling vehicle safety equipment and technology to reduce claims and insurance costs. We are working to enhance our safety training program with a driver simulator and hiring a safety program manager. And efforts to reduce recycling contamination is always ongoing. In this slide, it represents the current council-approved rate plan. All their rates above the red line have been completed, which leaves an increase of 90 cents in fiscal year 2025, and then no additional adjustments in 2026. The division is experiencing many cost drivers that are creating a challenge to cover our operating expenses and to maintain a required fund balance. Listed on this slide are those major factors that will show fiscal year 22 expense actuals, fiscal year 25 forecasted expenses, and the difference of those amounts. I would like to mention that these drivers are seen across the industry. The fleet, the solid waste fleet, is mainly made up of heavy equipment that requires diesel fuel. And diesel fuel actuals in fiscal year 22 was just over a little over $1 million. In fiscal year 25, it's forecasted to be over 1.6 million. That's a difference of 500,000, or an increase of 54%. The cost of fuel continues to impact the fund despite the reduction of driven miles that I just mentioned. Insurance costs have also increased by 148% from fiscal year 22 by almost $1.6 million. An increase that was factored in past rate model, but the inflation is now higher than predicted. Another increase is to our ADEQ fees for trash disposal. This is a small amount compared to the rest of them, with just over $47,000, but it's another example of an increased expense that could not be predicted. The inflation of equipment also continues to rise. The cost of an ASL, which is the automatic side load truck that collects your residential trash and recycling, has increased from just under $362,000 to over $500,000. So that's $150,000 increase per vehicle. This is just one type of equipment that the fleet consists of. There's several other types. In each of those, we have a lifespan in between 6 to 8 years, and we typically order 10 pieces of equipment a year in order to keep the fleet within its lifespan, which helps to assist with higher repair costs and to reduce longer downtimes. If you factor in the number of the equipment purchased each year, that is a substantial additional expense to the fund. The last driver I would like to cover is salaries and benefits. The increase from fiscal year 22 actuals to fiscal year 25 forecast is $2.6 million. That's a 53% difference.
Mayor, before we leave this slide, I've got a couple of questions. Hi. I'll let you get a drink.
I was actually just, if it's okay with you, Councilmember Turner, I just want to finish on the salary and benefits. I do want to be completely.
Oh, I thought she was finished on salary and benefits.
I want to be completely transparent. In FY23, we did add 2 positions. So we did add a roll-off driver position, and we did add a curb equipment operator position, which are funded out of this fund. The total cost of those would be about $140,000. So if I back that out, it's still an increase of 51%. What Ms. Moreno covered earlier, though, as one of her efficiencies, was that decrease of 20% in overtime hours. An overtime hour costs us, it's time and a half. It costs us 50% more than a regular hour. Had we not seen that operational efficiency, had this team not done that incredible job of decreasing that overtime, our salary and benefits would be substantially higher. So we are working and doing everything we can to reduce that. And with that, Mayor, I'll
Go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Wojtek. Ms. Marino, thank you. On the second line down, insurance costs, what insurance is included in that line?
Mayor, Councilmember Turner, Mr. Carr will cover that within the next couple of slides if you're willing to wait on that answer.
Okay. And just to preload, I guess, that part of the presentation, I appreciate the new information that we've added to employees in that department that only then adjusts that to a 51% increase. But I know we haven't approved raises of 51%. So I'm assuming the benefit side of that must be what's increasing. So I'm just wondering if that includes the insurance, and is it included in both? But I'll let you go ahead then, just so you know what I'll be listening for.
Yeah, so Mayor and Councilmember Turner, I'll answer that now. Mr. Carr is going to go into detail on the diesel fuel and insurance. Under salary and benefits, the cost there is the benefit to the employee. So that would be the employer's portion of their health care insurance and those insurances. What's factored above in the insurance cost line is our citywide risk management insurance, workers' compensation, the employer portion of those, and Mr. Carr will cover that here shortly.
Okay, thank you. That's the piece of information I was asking about. Thank you.
All right, but before you go, a quick question. Why do you have FY '22? Was that the last time we had a rate increase? Is that why we're comparing '22 and not '23?
Mayor, you're correct. That was the
Okay.
last time we presented.
Okay.
And we talked at that time specifically diesel fuel and insurance costs. So we wanted to come back and show you, while we thought they were extraordinary increases at the time, we've continued to see that. We want to try and mitigate that and get ahead of it.
All right.
So, Mr. Carr.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Wojtanko. We want to take this opportunity to provide a deeper look into a couple of the cost factors and provide you with a reminder of what we have shown at previous rate and budget presentations. So this graph was originally presented to Council in our June of 2022 presentation, and this represents the growing cost of diesel fuel. The estimated increases in fuel costs were not included in our residential service rate, and instead a fuel surcharge was recommended. The intention was that when fuel costs stabilized, the fuel surcharge would no longer be necessary. It's worth noting that the division has been working proactively, as you've heard, to reduce the number of miles driven per year, with a decrease of 45,000 miles from 2022 to FY24. Without this reduction in miles, the impact to the solid waste fund would have been far greater than anticipated. Okay. This slide was presented to Council during the April FY25 budget presentation. This represents the budgeted amount, actual cost, and unrecovered totals from 2022 to FY25. We use these figures to determine the fuel surcharge amount for FY25, and as you can see, we were anticipating $613,350 of unrecovered funds for fiscal year 25. As a result, we requested a 91-cent fuel surcharge, which was approved by Council and implemented in July of 2024. When we discuss our recommendations later in the presentation, we'll be proposing to bring the increased costs into our base budget and remove any future residential fuel surcharges. And now we'll have a chance to discuss our insurance costs.
Can I just, sorry about that. So the last, where it says in the 91-cent fuel charge, that's what's going to be collected for fiscal year 25, the 613,000. That's what it yields, basically. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So our insurance costs include insurance premiums, risk administration, and workers' compensation. This graph was presented to Council in our June 2022 presentation and represents the actual cost increases to insurance for the solid waste division. During the presentation, we informed Council that a one-time increase was not included in our rates and that $530,000 would be unrecovered for the FY23 budget year. Unfortunately, the increases to our insurance have continued to rise and are predicted to increase steadily over the next 5 years. This is due in part to the global insurance market being hit by catastrophic events, causing insurance premiums to increase by 20 to 40%. While our 5-year forecasts are typically accurate in other areas, keeping up with inflation has proved to be very difficult. Of note, we had a $1 million increase over estimated budget in FY24, and each subsequent year is increasing on average of $925,000, with a total change cost of $7.1 million. The Solid Waste Division is taking proactive measures to increase safety by providing a robust driver's training course, bringing in outside vendors to provide safety training, and testing a new system that reduces backup accidents. These measures, along with citywide safety initiatives, should help to decrease our risk and in the future reduce insurance increases. Now that we've discussed many of the contributing cost factors for solid waste, we'll present the recommendations for rate increases over the next 5 years. This slide depicts our current approved rate increases and the Solid Waste Division's proposed rate increases. The currently approved rate increases are solely in January of 2025 at 90 cents, with no additional increases going forward. The recommended increases are as follows: an additional 55 cents in March of 2025, an increase of $1.50 in July of 2025, which would remove the fuel surcharge, and an additional $1.25 each January through FY30. This slide represents the monthly rates with the recommended increase from 2025 to FY30. With the additional 55-cent increase in March of 2025, the monthly rate increases to $28.25, and the extra container increases to $14.50. In July, an additional 59 cents over the fuel surcharge would bring our rate to $29.75 and $15.75 for the additional container. The rest of the rates going forward do not have a fuel surcharge included and will be increased by $1.25 each January. This results in a monthly rate of $36 for monthly service and an extra container charge of $20.50 in January of 30/30. This is an average increase of 4% per year, which helps to catch up and keep up with inflation. Mayor and Council, we have reviewed the current rates and proposed increases to our surrounding communities to ensure that our rate is in line with the industry and to benchmark our services. Since our last presentation in June of 2022, all of the comparison communities have had rate increases. After the approved January rate increase, this is how we will compare to the surrounding communities in services and costs per month. As you can see, all communities provide basic service, which are mandated by Maricopa County, including residential refuse and recycle collection. All other communities offer some form of bulk trash collection, whether it's monthly, quarterly, on-call, or pay-as-you-throw. Glendale offers residents curbside household hazardous waste collection and free container replacement. We are also the only community to include street sweeping, alley access control, or litter patrol in their solid waste services. With the additional services included in our monthly rate, Glendale still has one of the lowest costs in the valley. It's also worth noting that in January of 2025, the rate for service for the city of Phoenix is $36.99 per month, and that is higher than our proposed rate of $36 per month in fiscal year 30. Each of these communities has additional rate increases approved or in the process of approval by their council and will be most likely increasing in lockstep with our rates over the next 5 years.
Mayor and Council, with the staff recommended rate increase, this would be the change that we would see in our 5-year forecast. You can see our current year because we have a March proposed increase, and it would mean that while we still are drawing down fund balance this year, it would be significantly less than if we don't do anything. And then you can see that in FY 25-26, again, there's a small drawdown. Some years are positive, others are negative. We are recommending a 5-year rate forecast. This shows financial sustainability and is good for our bond agencies models, knowing that we have a long forecast, a long policy to be sustainable. So this would be our forecast with our rate implementation, and I do want to show you with our current rates. Again, we would, if we don't do this, we would draw down and maintain fund balance this year, maintain our fund balance policy, but next year we would be negative. So with that, Mayor, what we are recommending is these, and I can go through them kind of one at a time or overall, but this is really, do we want to remain with the current level of solid waste services? On my screen, it does show the first two is grayed out. The residential refuse and recycle collection, those are mandated services, and we really can't discuss if we want to reduce those services. We can reduce monthly bulk trash collection. If council's interested in that, we'd probably want to come back with what we might be able to save by going with an on-call type service or doing a limited collection where we limit the amount of material that residents put out. The biannual household hazardous waste collection, we can reduce that service and we can look at that. The cost to our residents to do that is minor. It's going to be under 25 cents per household per month. Ms. Moreno talked about the benefits to the residents and the benefits to solid waste. The benefits to the landfill for this as well is huge. It does keep these materials out of our landfill, help protect our landfill, not only today, but in future as well. Street sweeping, this is a benefit to our residents. It helps us maintain our air quality. Maricopa County is an attainment zone. We do have high dust levels, and we did increase street sweeping several years ago. It is a popular program, and if we miss someone's street, we hear about it. Alley access control, again, is a relatively minor amount, as is litter patrol. We're one of the few cities in the valley that do litter patrol, and I can pretty much guarantee that any of you driving here today did not see a lot of litter when driving those main arterial streets, because we have staff out there every day picking litter on those streets. So, Mayor, the first thing I'd ask for is, do we have a consensus on continuing with the current level of solid waste services?
With the current rate?
Current
With
level
our
of
current level,
service.
current level of
level.
services.
In other words, leave what we have.
May I make a comment, Mayor?
Go ahead.
I had my hand up.
Yes, I agree with that, but you said that the recycling was mandated. What did you mean by that?
So Mayor and Councilmember Malinar, thank you for that. So Maricopa County does mandate that that service is provided to each residential home twice per week. And we have a variance, so we can pick up trash once a week and recycle once a week. If we get rid of recycle, we then have to pick up trash twice a week. So we could say, let's not recycle, but the cost remains the same, because we would have to then come out and pick up your trash the second time a week. So we kind of misspoke there, but we are mandated to provide the service twice a week. So if you want to get rid of recycle, there's really no cost change.
We would just have 2 trash bins,
That's
basically. Correct. Would that save us any money?
So Mayor,
to not
Councilmembers-
have recycle?
Councilmember Malinar, recycle is not a cost center in the sense that it makes us money. It diverts material from landfill. There is a processing cost to it. We do get some money back, so it reduces our processing cost by recycling. But really, it's the right thing to do long-term for the environment.
Okay, very good.
You good?
Thank you, Mayor. Okay. A couple questions. How does the IGAs that we have with other cities affect our risk profile? And is that considered when we price out these IGAs with other cities? Because we have other trucks and activities happening on site that I would imagine increase our risk, because you've got trucks coming from outside the city of Glendale into our landfill. So is that considered when we figure out these rates that we're charging other cities, the tipping fees that we're charging?
So Mayor and Council, Councilmember Tomelshoff, that would be part of the landfill rates. That's not part of the solid waste collection rates. So when we come back and talk to you about landfill rates and what we charge these other cities, that would be the time to answer that. So I don't have that information today.
So is it the risk is for each different thing? So that's the insurance just for the collection?
Mayor and Council, that's correct. This is the insurance charges that solid waste is charged.
That's even worse
Landfill
than
would
I
have a
thought.
separate
I thought
amount
that
in
was
their
for
account.
everything. Okay, thank you for that. I do have another question though on the slide 15. So you're proposing a rate increase of 55 cents in March of 2025, and then another rate increase, but a simultaneous of another rate increase of $1.50, but then removing the fuel surcharge. Why wouldn't we just do both of the? Because I just worry that people are going to get confused. Why wouldn't we just do the $2.05 rate increase now and get rid of the fuel surcharge now? And that would essentially be a rate increase of $1.14 instead of 2 rate increases within just a couple of months of each other. And that would get the money into the system sooner than waiting until July. I just don't know why. I mean, just, when people get their bill, they're going to be like, I just had a rate increase, and I might remember how much it was, but why not just do the rate increase in March, all of it, and get rid of the fuel charge in March?
So, Mayor and Council, I'm going to have to ask Mr. Bailey a question, because we already have an approved 91 cents that runs through. If we could then amend that with whatever we do in March. I think we can, but I just want to know if we could.
You kind of caught me off guard here. So can you reframe which component of it is it that you're trying? Is it just the surcharge?
So we have it approved by council and ordinance. So with the new ordinance that we take forward, amending the rates, get rid of that one? Could we do it with one?
With one act? You could do it in one act, yes.
Okay. So
I would say, I mean, I think it's just a way more streamlined for residents to not be so confused that we're doing 3 different things. We just do one thing. We essentially, we get rid of the fuel surcharge and we adjust the rates all in March. That actually accomplishes getting the money into the, into the system sooner rather than later. These rate increases, I don't know how many calls you all get from your residents, but every time we do anything with the rates, it's just more confusion, and to do one in March and another one in July, and then taking off the fuel, I just think it's going to be very confusing, and I'm fine with the rates that you're proposing. I just don't know why we wouldn't just do it all in March.
Yeah, and I actually 100% agree with her. It's make it less confusing, make it simple. Let's just, let's get one time where people are angry, and then after that they get over it. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I support Councilmember Tomachoff's suggestion. You know how much I love rate increases. Yet, yeah, but I have to say you've made the case. I don't know who finally figured it out and made the case, but you have made the case. Insurance costs are outrageous. Equipment costs, that's all due to inflation. And salaries and benefits, we're probably still not paying them enough, even with whatever we're increasing the salaries to. So, as much as I hate it, I'm going to support it. I think we need to do it. And I like Councilmember Tomachoff's suggestion. Let's bite the bullet and do pain one time rather than twice next year. It makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to ask a question. A couple slides ago, I thought you were going to ask for consensus on all the services that we're currently getting right now. Do we want to maintain those? Were you going to ask this at the end, or?
So, Mayor, what I wanted to know first was, do we want to maintain the current service level? And if so, then the next one would, do we want to go forward then with the residential rate
and
adjustment?
everybody's good with the current level now?
And Mayor, if I could, we just had maybe it's longer ago than I remember, we just had a full discussion about the monthly bulk trash collection, and I think people like the monthly option, and people are willing to pay for it. So I don't know that we need to go through that exercise again. I think we've kind of, it's maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. How long ago was it?
Been a while.
It has it? I think, as far as I know, the residents, they love, and I think it just keeps it incentivizes people to do their landscaping and trim their bushes and trim their trees, and they don't have to worry about it. They know when to do it, and they put it out there. And, people really appreciate the monthly bulk trash collection.
I did ask for consensus, and I've seen enough people saying yes on the items that we currently are doing now to keep those. So.
Okay, with that, Mayor, very simply then, next steps, there's a posting requirement that we have to do. We're going to take it and amend it, the posting to be what, with the consensus we received today, the 1 rate increase, not the 2.
Okay, well, I didn't ask that question yet.
No, so next steps.
No,
sorry.
I didn't ask.
You're
I
correct.
didn't ask about the rate increase.
Yes.
I asked about keeping the services
Okay.
that we have. So the rate increase with the difference, Councilmember Tomachoff suggested. Everybody good with that?
And at the same time, taking the fuel surcharge off. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we're good there too.
Okay, so with that, Mayor, council members, there's a posting requirement. That posting will get done in the next day, maybe 2. We do have to confirm with the attorney's office it is correct, because we do have to amend that now from what we had planned. With that posting, there will be then a future voting meeting where this will come on. We'd love to do this in December to get Councilmember Clark, her last voting meeting, to adjust rates.
Gee,
It'll still be December or January.
I can't thank you enough.
You're welcome. And then we will be coming forward with a discussion on commercial solid waste rates. They are separate from our residential rates. They impact our commercial customers only. And with that, we're done. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Ms. Bauer.
Water services rate study process.
Mayor, members of the council, here to provide staff report on the next item is Ron Serio, our Director of Water Services.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Today, I will be discussing the proposed rate study process that Water Services will be going through. This item is for information and discussion. Just as a reminder, during our budget process last fiscal year, we mentioned the need that we had to do another rate study. The last rate study or actual rate approval by council was back in 2021. In August of this past August, council approved a contract with Raftellus to perform that study. And basically, we just started. So we provided data to that consultant. They're doing what they need to do. We expect to get their initial draft report back sometime next month. So today, just want to go over what the current rate increases that were approved in 2021, what they are, and then look at some of the drivers that caused the need for us to consider rates again. They include water consumption trends and our capital and O&M costs and drought drivers. Also, we'll look at the scope of the 24 study that we're going to do this year, what's included in that, what our public outreach plan is, and our next steps. As I mentioned, back in 2021, council authorized rate increase. It was 4.3% for water, 3% for wastewater or sewer, and combined it was a total of 3.7%, which we thought would be pretty much in step with inflation and account growth. We still have two approved increases remaining. One, it will be effective in January of 25, and another one a year later. What we wanted to do is look back over the last 3 years since that rate study was done and the rate increases were approved, and just to give an idea of what has actually happened. So if you look at the red line, our water consumption or water sales have actually reduced. And that's a combination of a lot of things. The water use and water demand is tied to weather, if it's a really hot year or a mild year, the amount of rain, when the rain comes. If we get a lot of rain in the hot summer months, it helps reduce water use. And also during this time frame, in calendar year 23, the Colorado River was in a tier 2A drought scenario. So there was a lot of messaging, and I think our residents took it serious. There was an effort to conserve water. And in fact, the city of Glendale, the last 2 years, we have reduced our water consumption by over 10% each of the last 2 years. So I think that's a great story in terms of conservation and reduced water use. And this happened at the same time. We've seen an increase in account growth. In this 3-year period, we had over 2,000 new accounts come in, but still reduced our water use. So I think that's a really good news item. With respect to what's happened in our actual O&M budget, if we look at our actuals over the 3-year period, they've increased an overall amount of 34%, which is way more than what we had anticipated in 2021. The key drivers in our O&M budget are our personnel, our chemicals, our raw water, and our electricity. Those are our 4 big drivers. And they increased differing amounts. However, the overall average was about 34%. With respect to construction costs and our capital program, we've seen pretty significant increases in there also. It's really more difficult to identify exactly how much they've increased because we do a variety of different work. But this index seemed to best represent what would match what we do at 38%, and I believe it's conservatively low. ADOT has on their website that they've seen a 69% increase in this same 3-year period in their costs. And Glendale, we have a valve and hydrant contract that's the same. The scope hasn't changed. It went out to bid in 22, and the low bidder then, compared to last week when we got bids in for the exact same scope, we've seen an increase of 40% in 2 years. So costs are rising, so we can't purchase as much in our capital program. So that's what's happened on the cost in the last couple of years. And the next 2 dot points are what's happened on the revenue side. So in 21, when we did our rate study, we were expecting in this 3-year period an increase of 13.4% in revenue, which was the rate increase plus account growth. What we've actually seen is about an 8.5% increase. So what we have done to meet our O&M expenses is we've deferred some capital projects, and that is okay to do for a season, but it's not sustainable in the long run. Glendale has invested hundreds of millions over the last several decades into water and sewer infrastructure, and we need to assess it and keep it in good working order to provide the services that we provide to our residents. The other thing that's driving this next rate study is the Colorado River and the shortages that are expected on that river system. So we've asked our consultant to look at some of the things that we talked about in our water resource update, which are, adding more groundwater wells for the short term, and then looking at additional water resources in the long term. The Bartlett Lake increased capacity by a new dam being built there, and advanced water purification. We've also asked them to look at these separately to come back with options. So have the rate study without these included, and then have another option with them included, so we can see what the difference is and have options for how we would like to move forward. The current study that's just starting, the things that it's looking at are typical things: the water rates and cost of service, and wastewater rates and cost of service. Something new that we've added is a stormwater rate. And the stormwater, we have obligations to the stormwater system, but we don't have a rate for that. And a lot of other cities, I should say, in the valley and across the country have adopted rates for stormwater. And we think it's a good thing to do. It'll help put some focus on that program. And right now it would fund multiple departments because water performs some of these services, transportation, engineering, and parks perform parts of the functions necessary for this program. Also, urban irrigation rates for the flood irrigation. The last increase was in April of 21. So we're having them look at those rates also to see where they need to be. All right, our public outreach plan includes several things. So first, we're going to have a dedicated city webpage and put all of our information on there, our proposed rates and fee information, links to videos that are informational that describe why we need a rate increase, have frequently asked questions on there, what the time frame is. We'll have a dedicated phone number if they want to call us with feedback. We'll have a dedicated email address. We're looking at having 2 public meetings, one in the north part of the city, one further south. We're also looking to take advantage of social media and newsletters, just getting the word out however we can, just so people can participate in the process. And the next steps, there's several things here, but next we would take this same presentation to our Citizens Utility Advisory Commission, our CUAC, just to notify them of what the process is as well. And then we'll come back to them a couple of different times. So in January, we will go to the commission and to council workshop to kind of report, to bring the reports of what the study is and get some guidance on what options that we want to move forward with. And once we have that, then we'll start conducting public outreach. And in March, and this is tentative, we're expecting to come back to a council voting meeting to set a notice of intention for a public hearing date, which would be 60 days later in May. And then in May, there'd be a hearing and then a formal vote by council to adopt or not adopt rates. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
I do have a question. So is the consultant going to make a recommendation? I mean, I know, and I mean, I don't have a problem voting for rate increases, but what I did have a problem was voting for a 5-year rate increase because I was sure and that we were going to have to come back and change the rates before the end of the 5-year rate increase. So is the consultant going to make a recommendation for a 5-year rate increase or a 5-year plan, or are we asking the consultant to do?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachoff, what the consultant will do, they look beyond that. They'll probably look out 10 years and project what rates need to be. And they're not going to tell us how long we need to approve them. And that's pretty standard with how they do these. And then it's our call in terms of how many years we want to adopt.
So I said before, I would prefer anyway. I think it's way more realistic in the environment we're living in now with inflation and all the variables. And we knew for sure the cost of water, the operational cost of water are the same, even though the usage is going down. So we knew the raw water prices were going to go up. We were pretty certain that was going to happen. That we adopt a 5-year plan, but that we're not telling residents that these are the rates we're going to charge for the next 5 years. I think that's, my opinion anyway, that's a better approach. So at least hopefully we can have that discussion. But I'm curious, so the stormwater, this is a different question. Is that just going to be a line item on the water bill, or how do you assess a fee for stormwater? I'm just curious.
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachoff, yeah, that's typically how it's done. It would be another line on the utility bill that would show a stormwater fee. Because right now we're performing the services and it's getting performed out of several funds, like the enterprise fund in water, the general fund. So depending on what department's doing the work, they're finding a way to fund it. So it's something we have to do. We have permits that we have to meet for this program, and it's just dedicating some funding for that.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand the need for it. I was just curious. I mean, there's no way to measure, it would just be a fee on people's water bill.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I actually have a question for Councilmember Turner. He's on AM1, and I don't have the answer. I think he probably will. On Bartlett Lake, where they're raising the dam, when is that expected to be finished?
That's a very good question, Mayor, and I can find the answer for you in a few minutes, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay, all right. I thought maybe you knew it off the top of your head. Because that's something that, until that's done, we don't have that additional water. And so I didn't know if this was something that was near term or 10 years out, or had no idea.
It's within the 10-year range, I do believe, inside 10 years.
Okay, all right. And you can tell me later, that's fine.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, did you have anything else?
That's it.
Okay, and no other questions? All right, thank you. All right, moving on, city manager's report.
Mayor, members of the council, I have 2 items for you today. Again, this is getting to be a little bit of a pattern recently, it seems like. But the city of Glendale had a very big night at the Public Relations Society of America regional conference, and we received the Copper Anvil Award. And this award goes to the Communications Team of the Year. So it looks at the entire team of people in the communications department. And so we received the Team of the Year. In addition to that, Glendale also received the Judges Award, which is the Judges Award is given to the best individual campaign through the year, and it includes all of the both private sector and government sector, corporations. All those entities get judged by this, so there's no separate category. And again, we received the Judges Award for the Ruby Tuesday Satisfaction Way campaign that you all participated in, with the Rolling Stones being here in Glendale. And this year the PRSA had a record number of entries, and so we did incredibly well, winning both the coveted Communications Team of the Year award and the Judges Award for that. So again, congratulations to the team that is every day, I think, doing an outstanding job. And then this week, I saw him yesterday in the new employee orientation as we were welcoming new employees here. But our new Chief Information Officer, Steve Martin, not related to the comic Steve Martin, started with us, and we're real excited to have Steve on board. He comes from us as the Deputy CIO for Austin, Texas, and so he's relocated here to the Valley. When we did the recruitment, we decided to do it in-house using our HR department and our team there, and we thought it'd be worthwhile just to see what kind of a candidate list we could identify, because you can spend upwards of $40,000 to $50,000 hiring an outside firm. And what I'll tell you is I was shocked, because when we got down to the 3 finalists that the staff had kind of worked through and reviewed and presented to me, I kind of walked away thinking I could almost go with either of the 3 and would have felt really good about it. But Steve really rose just a notch above the other 2 candidates. And so we're real excited to have him on board, and so I'm sure he'll get a chance to introduce himself to you once he gets settled in. So again, he worked prior to this, prior to Austin, he worked with the state of Nevada, and then he was also in the private sector as well with the Viad Corporation, and worked at the city of Las Vegas. So please welcome him when you get a chance to Glendale. I think he's going to be a great addition to our leadership team. And Mr. Mayor, that concludes my report.
Thank you. City Attorney's report.
No report, thank you.
Thank you. Council items of special interest. Make that opportunity available to each council member to indicate topics that they'd like to have discussed in the future at a council future workshop. Mr. Baldonegro, have you any?
Yes, sir, I have one. It's come to my attention that some of the veterans in my community have been working diligently over the past 9.5 years to get a park renamed. And over those years, several of those veterans unfortunately have passed away, and more things are being added to the conversation. They would like to install some flag poles. They would like to have a mural honoring the 5 branches of the military. And there are 3 large plaques that have already been paid for. They're being made right now to be installed throughout the community. I've talked with them, and they would like to. It's been a long time of them working through this, and they would like to have a day of celebration to really see if we can really go forth with a lot of things that they've got donations for, have volunteers to help us with. I think we really need to really pay attention to seeing what the city can do to help them to really have a really robust and appropriate, respectful day of celebration for everything they've been doing the last 9.5 years, so we can really make it right.
Good.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else? That's it? Okay. Councilmember Clark?
Nothing today, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Mellner?
Nothing today.
Thank you. Councilmember Tomchuk?
Nothing today, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Turner?
Not today, Mayor.
Vice Mayor?
Nothing, Mayor.
And I have nothing, so can I get a motion to go into executive session? I have a motion.
Mayor, point of order. We have no executive session today.
Okay, I'm going to say no. Okay, that's even better.
Hallelujah.
Dies
Okay.
for lack of a second.
We're still eating though, right? Okay, so we didn't vote on that, so would you like to rescind your motion?
I rescind my motion.
Thank you. Okay, with that, thanks for everyone being here. We're adjourned.
Whew.